What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Actuali Podcast. I'm Chris,
I'm DJ.
and today we're going to be continuing our coverage of John Vervaeke's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. It's a lecture series. It's actually 50 lectures, 50 parts long, and so far we've done 16 of them. Tonight is episode 17, Gnosis and Existential Inertia. And if you're curious to find out what that means, stay tuned because we're going to be journeying along with Professor John Vervaeke out of University of Toronto. He's a Tai Chi master, Buddhist Zen teacher, as well as a psychologist, cognitive scientist, and has quite a wide range of knowledge to share with us and to, with hope, assist humanity in awakening from what he has termed this meaning crisis that we find ourselves in, this time of social breakdown, sense of meaninglessness, sense of disconnection with reality, sense of domicide, the loss of a sense of home, all of these things.
Yeah,
Let me get us up here on Mr. Facebook
the,
before I forget.
the loss of home as what was happening during the Hellenistic period, where you had many people moving from one location to the other, and it was no longer like everybody in your town and everybody in your city, because they could be, and particularly nowadays, somebody who lives right next to you could be from the other side of the planet or the other side of the country, or
True.
so during the Hellenistic period they were going through a period of a period of domicide, where this idea of the centralized home was losing its fixedness within the communal conscious.
Right?
Um,
Yeah, because it had been going on for such a long time in Greece, and so people are very identified with that place and the feel of the people, and it's just been going on for hundreds and hundreds
yeah,
of
well,
years.
you have Athenians, you have Trojans, you have Spartans. You're an Athenian, you're a Trojan, you're a Spartan. You kind of have or had that sense, like here, like I'm a West Virginian. Oh, I'm a New Yorker. But now it's getting even particularly of recent, people have been migrating around the country. Just speaking of America here, but moving out of cities and moving into other areas, and I can tell, I live in a relatively not like super middle of nowhere small town or anything like that, but still small enough town where the 1,200 people that live there, and then you see all the new people that are coming in that are more than just tourists or traders, if you will, but are not what the neighbors were originally. And I don't mean that in a bad way or anything like that. I just mean not this cozy sense of home. Now I go there and I hardly recognize half the people there anymore. And it's not because, the younger generation's coming up and finally out at the bar. It's like literally like, who are these people and where'd you come from? Like, you're cool. I like you. Now I have to learn a whole bunch of new names and figure out a whole bunch of new stories.
Whole new people.
Yeah, whole new people, which can be distressing, particularly if it's in mass on a
Large scale. All at
large
once,
scale, where everything's getting mushed up and shaken around. And if, say, you're not in, or like you've, this is happening like in Britain, in like particularly London, with the what do you call them, the Cockney people, which is considered a subset of English. Their neighborhoods are no longer Cockney neighborhoods, and there are people that are dealing with, and I've listened to a lot of them speak up, be like, I don't know anybody here. It doesn't look the same as what it was. It's not the same. And you can say, oh, they're racist and bigots because it's different people, but no, it's like literally what they knew, their home is now vastly different. It's kind of like living in a small town and then it gets really developed. Like I remember this, in Jefferson County was very much like this. When I first moved here, it was cow fields and apple orchards, and then all these development homes
Quaint,
just started.
small college town, had its little bit of influx.
Well, and I was in Charlestown. In Charlestown, it was just like the biggest thing that we had was the racetrack, right? And then something started to happen, and a bunch of houses were being put up, and now it's to the point
sprawl.
where if I don't go to
The
Charlestown,
DC Metro sprawl spreading out.
yeah, and if I don't go to these, these towns and places I've been before, when I come back, I'm like, what the hell is this place? Like, this is completely different, It's kind of sad a little bit, and I mean, like, sentimentally sad, not like circumstantially sad, because, frankly, Charlestown has gotten better through all this, but I go back and it's like, it's not the same. Like I go there expecting to be like, oh yeah, the old family home and all this stuff, and it's just like so vastly different. Even tiny little Tater Hill, which I grew up on, is like, go to the backside of that, and now there's like new houses being built on the backside of it, and that's where all like the poor folk and their old family homes were, and now they're like family homes are gone and new places put up, and
so you have new people from different states and city areas coming in. The culture is starting to change a little bit.
Well, and I wouldn't like.
Now this isn't even close to as radical as what happened in Athens and Greece.
Yeah,
where for hundreds of years they had molded this particular very open way of living with one another, but it was their way of doing it.
Yeah,
and they experienced this influx of new peoples.
Yeah.
And
also
in these ancient times, and there was major disruptions as people learned to get along, different cultures learned to remarry,
and losing a lot of people too. It's like, say, if you're young and have the traveling spirit, you go and you disappear, and it's not like you're no longer having the child inheriting the house from the parent that was inherited from the grandparent, and it you're now on the other side of the world. Like back in that time, the world wasn't nearly as huge as it is now, or nearly as small as it is now, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah.
But still, you're like somewhere else, and then maybe you're not coming back home. So then what happens to that like inherited home?
That deep sense of home. And another aspect of the Dharma side is an understanding of why we're here and how we fit into the cosmos, into this larger story and this larger world.
Yeah.
And when different gods, people's different beliefs come in to contact, then it can be disruptive for both peoples involved as they learn how their gods can get together, or their cultures, their belief systems can try and calibrate in relation to one another.
And I think
that takes time. It's beautiful things happen. Look here in the States. And we have this beautiful mix of culture that's been going on for the last few hundred years, and it's helped us invent jazz, soul, rock and roll, stand-up comedy, Hollywood movies. Well, Hollywood is not what it used to be, but the film industry, or the art of film in general. But I mean, among those, jazz, soul, and rock and roll, I think, are probably our greatest exports to this planet.
Yeah, and I think the way you described
hip hop's in there too, and that doesn't happen without all of our cultures mixing.
Yeah, and like I think you explained domicide as far as what we're feeling it a little bit better than just losing a home as in a place.
Because there's a home. Deep. Yeah, go ahead.
Home is also
how you feel like you belong.
Shared sets of beliefs, shared sets of interpersonal understandings. Because you can have home,
shared traditions, and there's shared belief systems. I mean, they're as fundamental as how did reality come to be, and how are we supposed to act, and what is our God like?
Well, and also like
those are very deep fundamental things.
Local lingos and inside jokes and other stuff like that too. And you can have home in internet spaces that are completely non-physical as well. Different communities, if you will.
Sure. I was listening to a podcast last night with Vervaeke, talking with John Vervaeke actually, and he was talking about how parkour was a sense of community, and there's all these disparate youths from different areas. There's French, there's West African, there's one like Italian kid, and they all were kind of latchkey kids from different parts of the world that met and became close because they invented, literally, these are the people that invented parkour. And so he's telling that story about the people that invented parkour, and how in his own experience with his friends, it develops a very deep sense of community and a sense of home. And these kids, they didn't have great parents in some cases, or they were just in a new place and they didn't know how to relate to anybody. So having something that gave them a sense of home and understanding and meaning and purpose was very important and helpful for them. And we're losing that right now in the world today, as we have lost faith in all the prevailing institutions, be they government, be they religious, You know, the fastest growing spiritual sect in the world right now, the fastest growing religion is actually the nuns, no religion.
Yeah, the secular,
not N-U-N-S nuns, but N-O-N-E-S nuns, no religion.
Well,
And
I think there's also a component of this that there is a certain forced component to it. Whereas, like, you know, like naturally, if you get diverse groups of people from different places and you let them do what they do, they'll figure it out. Yeah, there'd be some butting of heads. But then, say, if you want to inject certain ideas, certain new lingos, certain new inside jokes, ways of being, and forcibly inject, well, in order to do that, you have to destroy other things that pre-existed, opposed to figuring out how to meld, like the gods. One god wasn't destroyed over another. They were merged into something else. And what we're having right now is, you know, not getting conspiracy theory or nothing, but there's definitely an injection of false culture being put into the world that isn't real, whether it's intentional or not.
Right.
You know, and it's that forceful nature, I think, that is causing us the most problems, because we're not doing it naturally as we would.
Together.
Well, we're not bartering with each other.
If you don't believe this way,
then you're this
canceled or ostracized, or you're termed this extremely
you know all the words, guys.
Cruel term.
You know all the things that we call each other when we're so dead set that we're right.
Yes, and we're all becoming increasingly ideologically bound. And in those ideologies, those belief systems that we're becoming ideologically possessed by, we're losing our capacity for critical thinking, because we really do want to belong. So, you know, if there's a group that we kind of identify with, we don't want to believe that it's wrong. So we don't want to hear things that are counter to it, unless our motivation is to find out what is good and true for one and all, regardless of, even if it means that I was wrong about something that I believed. And that's a tricky thing for people to come to at first, unless you realize this is the most objective way that we have. We have to try and prove even our own selves wrong, and to challenge our own conceptions and beliefs, because we're trying to find out what is conducive for long-term survival of our species, of the healthy aspects of humanity and our cultures, and how do we help those things prosper.
Well, that's one of the definitions of what makes what makes something morally right. What is morally right is what does best for the species, frankly, at its most base level.
And one and all is very important addendum to that. Yeah. What is good for one and all. So you're keeping in mind that the individual is the ultimate minority. Yeah. And it's that if you want to fractionate it down and figure out how do we help minority interests on our planet, in our world, in our cultures, you got to start with the individual, because every single person's life is different. They're going to all each have individual challenges.
Well, you know, you wouldn't sacrifice the group for an individual. We'd call that evil, right? You know, evil people do that. But I think it's just as evil to sacrifice the individual for the group. And, you know, if we didn't learn our lessons the past 100 years of how dangerous that sacrificing individuals for the betterment of the group is. If there's going to be sacrifice, it's individuals deciding to sacrifice their own individualness to get by within the group for what's best for the individual and the group together. You know, because
it's like that advice. You should love yourself so that you can love others as well.
And, you know, individual and group are fused together. You can't, like...
No, truly, we are indivisible in that we are interconnected.
Yeah.
We truly are, and we don't realize that, because we do have unique perspectives, like apertures of being that we exist through and we experience through. But we are trading atoms with everything and everyone around us all the time. We really are one thing, this cosmos that has unfolded out unto this point. Yeah. And we name the different things and think of them as separate so that we can navigate and communicate. However, we are all intrinsically interconnected.
Yeah, and even as a species, and Vervaeke touched on this, not necessarily as a species, but touched on this idea, I think it was last week, where, you know, you can't do it alone, particularly, you know, the idea, it's a group thing. Agape is somebody before you, having love pass through them, passed into you, that you pass into the other, that makes people out of things. And this is so true for humans that, you know, we've had kids that were raised, you know, like by wolves or out in the woods without humans. and they don't learn how they will never be able to speak after a
Right.
certain point because their brain literally doesn't develop if they're not around other humans.
Yeah.
And and we found out, the tragedies of the last, 100 years that if you don't touch a baby when it's an infant and touch
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
regularly, they'll die. That's how important it is for humans to have each other. And even an individual alone still has a relationship to the group. The fact that you have to put alone means there's, an individual alone. Well, if the individual was just the way it was, then it would just be the individual. But no, alone, without
There's the idea of
others.
alone. Yeah. We are super social creatures. And that's why we're so easily waylaid by ideas like communism and socialism.
Sure,
is
well, it
because
sounds great,
There is something good about. Well, absolutely.
I want everybody
we
to
should
have enough
protect
to
the
eat and
commons.
be able
The
to.
people should be having access to the commons and deciding how the commons are utilized and shared. And we realized that when we started to come up with our democratic republics, and started to say that oligarchy isn't the way. That's not the healthiest way to run a country. Monarchy isn't a healthy way. Fascism, so on and so forth. The commons must be protected and be used for the well-being of one and all, and the people should have choice over that. And then, of course, we are social beings. The problem is trying to create that reality through a central authoritative body that inevitably becomes authoritarian, and we've seen that experiment multiple times. And here in the States, we don't have a perfect system either. We just have kind of the best thing that we've come up with yet as humans. And there's many different versions of that now in the world because it's worked so well here. You see it all over Europe and all over the planet now.
It is said that America is a young country, and we sometimes get crapped on by other countries at how young we are, but we are the longest lasting country to fight a revolution to become an independent nation. And then we created one of the best governing structures that humans have come up with.
With a very loose, initially, we had a very loose leadership structure. We had people that were inspiring figures, but we didn't have a king over here. We didn't have some kind of government, we had a confederacy. We
were more anarchistic than anything else because you had your farmland and you had your neighbors and you had the people around you.
Yeah.
And so where socialism and all of its offshoots really failed is
a total misunderstanding of Christianity over here also hurt the natives.
Well, real quick, let me.
Yeah.
The thing that socialism and all of its derivatives really got wrong was the sacrificing the individual for the group,
right,
and not looking to the individual for ultimate responsibility over the individual. Because the individual is supposed to be responsible over the group. Yeah, well, that's how we end up murdering people for being Christians, Jews, Muslims, or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you're part of this group. No. You're responsible for what everybody else did.
For being intelligent, for being a craftsman, for being a writer, for being a meager farmer that had managed to have a small home for themselves and their family and some food to live off of. Yeah. All of these people got included in the bourgeois elite, and eventually the whole Tanate itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the idea that say even democratic republics, which we are, but even Soviet republics, there's still has to be a smaller group of people that makes decisions for everybody else. But when they can hide themselves in, so the word Soviet is council. It's a council.
Yeah.
So when they hide behind the stamp of the Soviet, now they can get away with, well, I'm looking like I'm helping everybody, but I'm going to sacrifice the group for my wants.
Yeah.
And we can't see it because I can see when my neighbor's screwing me over a lot quicker than I can see some guy who's just one of 500 people in a decision group from a central office somewhere, And
it's oligarchy over there in Russia to this day, and unfortunately it's the same problem over here, but with a different kind of government that's been infiltrated and corrupted.
Pretty much
our democratic republic is, it's a tired imitation of what it used to be. It's now an oligarchy as well, according to Princeton in the 90s.
I think pretty much any democracy or republic democracy or democratic republic is going to, if not checked, fall into oligarchy. And I think the entire world, the most advanced countries are in oligarchy at this point. They select few people who have most of the resources.
Absolutely, yeah. Corporatism has spread across the planet. Corporations have been enthroned to such a degree that, and I remember hearing this fact back in the 2000s, But of the top 100 economies on the planet, the top 51 are corporations, multinational corporate entities. The bottom 49 are nations of the top. So that's the top 100 economies on the planet. Corporations have long since become more powerful and more influential even than our own nations, perhaps, or at least they're able to influence them in very powerful ways, and they're able to corrupt and influence elections.
Oh, dude, they get together.
Laws
They get together every year and brag and boast about what they're doing.
We have terms for it. The neocons, which happened, that, and we saw the clearness of that corruption during the Iraq War and Bush and Cheney. Now we have the neoliberals as well, which also all voted for that war. It's basically corporate overlords, basically corporate interests that have
when your politicians
gained sway over our politicians, or have literally put their own friendly politicians into positions of power.
Well, and really, like, one will ask, well, what are we to do about it? I don't think burning down this system is the appropriate way, so I'm not one of those radical whatevers, but I think the way is to
That's dumb, because you got to come up with something better first.
Take more individual responsibility for your decisions. Don't shop at the Walmart if you're not for it.
This is just good life advice in general.
Don't use the Amazon if you're not for it. Find something other than
Google
if you're not about it.
Don't blame everything outside of yourself. Take responsibility. Because you're a part of society. We're all parts of society. And we have created this world. This world is a reflection of us.
Literally, put your money where your mouth is. Everybody wants to talk about corruption in these huge organizations, but they're still using Amazon. They're still using Google. They're still using, all these things, and they use them more and more and more and more. And they're like, where did all my local stores go?
We're doing it right now. We're on YouTube here. And so what do we do when we're in this situation where there's so much good to humanity. There's so many beautiful things that we have done, but there are also ways that we've become corrupted, systems that have become corrupted, communication channels that have been co-opted and basically kind of formed to particular money, powers, interests, benefits.
Well, and I'm not saying
they have their own ideological interests.
And I'm not necessarily saying that don't use these things. Like, I still go to Walmart.
Be aware and start asking. And we should actually start having these conversations en masse. I don't like my phone being made over in China.
Hold on. Just do one little thing every now and then. Be aware. Be like, oh, well, instead of buying the super cheap version that I can get off of Amazon that was made in some slave sweat labor in China or something like that, maybe pay a little bit extra and do a little bit of research to find a company that's not doing that sells the same product for a little bit more, and just do it, once.
Yeah, no, that's a good suggestion, because we're doing this with our media now. We are becoming the media, literally.
Yeah.
And independent media is becoming more popular than the legacy corporate media, CNN, ABC, Fox, those guys. We're seeing replacements that are more authentic, more genuine, more honest. Even if you don't agree with them, you can tell it's a totally different style of presentation. There's actual journalism going on rather than just opinion reinforcement that you see on these mainstream channels. And some of these channels that from CNN to Fox, they have been fanning the flames of the division in this country and in other countries for profit. And they know it because it gets clicks. They know what they're doing when they title things certain ways. And it's gotten gross. I don't even see it as journalism anymore.
Yeah, well, the AI will be taking over that end of just
probably
the crap journalism.
ChatGPTs. You can ask ChatGPT to write you an article and whatever you want in the style of a New York Times journalist, and it will do it.
But yeah, ultimately, because so last week we were talking a lot about agape, and that is a personal thing, literally in the case that it makes persons.
Yes, it's a co-creative process, and you're allowing agape that has been given to you by your parents, by, say, God, if you believe in God, or by this universe, and you're carrying out that co-creative process now with somebody else, with something else that's going to hopefully affect people.
And so children first start out, their only experience of love for themselves is the consuming love, so the eros end of love. But then eventually, as they mature, they're able to pass it through them onto other people. And so if you imagine adults coming through this revelation, going from this egocentric taking the love in to actually
internalizing
being agapic and moving it through. So you're having a shift from the egocentric position of understanding, which is more consumptive,
Yes.
to an actual participatory.
Yes. A profound participatory relation, a reciprocal realization that is like a feedback loop that feeds back in on itself. And so you're both growing through this process. And this is how we participate in culture and language. And Jesus understood this disclosure of the right kind of love, of agape, as the way for us to co-create with God. That's what makes it possible. Agape humanizes us from mere animalistic instincts.
And we discussed last week the word forgiveness,
Yes.
and it has two modes to it in my mind. There's the before, the giving before, say, it is asked for, or just the giving before for the sake of doing it. And that's what, Jesus, when he forgave people so they can be forgiven and given before. But then there's also agape is for, F-O-R, giving.
Yes.
It's something,
it is forgiven. Yeah, love is to be given. It's never to be expected. It's a very painful thing to try and expect love. Yeah. It's not something that one never needs to expect because we create it within ourselves.
And so with forgiveness is to give before, even if there isn't a slight, so there doesn't have to be, to still be forgiving.
Yeah, it's a sacrifice of your own egocentrism on behalf of another's growth into wholeness. As Vervaeke put it that way, and I really like that. Sacrificially extending our capacity for individuals to experience their own kairos, their own turning points.
Yeah.
And that's what Jesus represented, as he described in last episode. Jesus represented a kairos, a turning point in time.
At the right point in time.
Yes, that was embodied in a human being that was trying to share that kairos potential, that rebirth potential, just like Buddha was talking about rebirth and awakening, remembering.
Yep.
It's the same concept. He was trying to share this with people as well.
So we talked.
And they did it in a communal fellowship kind of fashion.
Yeah.
Also.
So we talked about Saul. In his revelation. So Saul was a Jew and a Roman, and at that time they were very conflictory. So
very tense relationship.
The way he remedied this was to focus very much on rules and laws.
Yes.
And
rules of behavior and conduct.
And he did not like the followers of the way. In fact, he helped others stone Stephen, who was the first martyr to death.
And that's what Christians were called early on.
Yeah.
They were called followers of the way.
I think I'm just going to start calling myself that instead
of Christian.
That.
Isn't that cool?
Just because when you say Christian, people are like, oh, whatever. But
when
it's
he said, follow me, that's what he meant. Live as I am living.
But yeah, so Saul was a pretty nasty dude. Like, he was a really nasty dude. So after he helped in the killing of Stephen, he got a contract to go take out the followers of the way.
Yeah, and he was down because he saw them as deeply threatening to the order that they had.
Sure, yeah, created. Because like they were making persons out of everybody.
Yeah, and the Jews and the Romans did not get along well, so they finally had some kind of semblance of stability going on. And he's like, these guys are super disruptive. We can't have this. Now, Christians, this was originally a put down.
Yeah. Oh, you're one of those. You're those Christians.
Anointed ones, huh?
Yeah, you think you're so much better than everybody else, huh?
Yeah, so Saul holds the coat.
Yeah.
Holds the coats.
Held the coats of other people. That's how he helped. And, I said this last week, but, like, there's the evil that will stone somebody to death. But there's the evil that'll make it easier for other people to stone people to death. Yeah. So Saul's not a good dude at this point. Well, he's Saul.
No, Saul is very ideologically possessed.
Yeah, and probably rageful and hateful too. Like, in order to do that, and so that's
he's resentful.
Really,
he's angry. He blames these people, and let's make examples of these people. Yeah. And so,
let me go. So
even if he's not going to pick up a stone himself, he's at least going to cheer on the people or help them, assist them by holding their coats.
Yeah. But he goes on his journey.
Yeah.
He gets struck by a bright light, and it floors him.
Yeah, literally knocks him on his ass.
And he hears, "Why do you persecute me?" So he asks, "Who are you, my Lord?" Or "Who are you, Lord?" And not in the sense of like God, Lord, but someone in a higher position. And the reply is, "I am Jesus that you persecute." And, whether it was the guilt of what he's done, maybe he was dehydrated, maybe he was doing some what do you call it? Road beer,
Yeah, right.
like doing something like that. But he had this instant where he realized what he was doing was wrong. And I think at this point too, he didn't have the intention to like go help the Christians or the Waists at this time. But he was still going there, and then
No, he was on his way to go destroy some people.
yeah,
Is
but
what he was doing.
he was rescued, like in his time of need, and he probably was hungry and starved. And traveling was very
Oh, they
dangerous.
healed
back then.
him. They fed him.
Yeah, and he
So
was struck blind.
there's a cognitive science side to this. Now, Vervaeke likes to break down enlightenment, as he's proved that we can actually measure when this happens in the brain. We see this, and there's also telltale signs of when it happens. And you always see this language in the scripture, be they Far East with Buddhism and ancient Hinduism, or you hear further into the West here, you hear about the bright light, the super apparent, the super salient, the glorious, a voice speaking out of nowhere in this high state of consciousness where there's an onto-normative experience being had. It's something that feels realer than realer than you've ever experienced. Mm-hmm. So he's having quite a transcendent experience. Telltale language of a transformative, transcendent experience. So now he travels to Antioch and experiences care from the people that he was going to destroy.
Yeah, and then imagine that. It's like, imagine yourself like you really despise someone. Like really, and you think they're just like a terrible person. You'd rather not be around them, and you think they're awful and whatever.
Yeah, these are horrible people.
But that's the person that picks you up on the side of the road and helps get your car off the side of the road after
you
something
find out
happened,
that the prejudgment, the image that you held of those people was not accurate at all.
Yeah, well, that's why we used to warn each other against prejudice.
Oh yeah, like overgeneralizing, like thinking all people are a certain way because they're a certain sex or skin color,
or
racism.
Or
bigotry,
or even like political alignment.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like the people that should know better are now the ones that are like those rightists or conservatives and stuff. And
it's really strange to see the left act like the right was in the 80s.
Yeah, and I
about certain things, and
I made a joke to a friend of mine recently, and he got it. And it's not really a joke; it's true. But I told him, I was like, not too long ago, I used to have to defend the blacks and the gays from bigoted conservatives. Right. Now I'm defending conservatives from
black gay conservatives.
The people who speak for the blacks and the gays, and it's just like, isn't that funny? And just in a few years, and that's the danger of thinking you're right.
To the point that you're not even questioning.
Yeah, and you're like, well, of course they're horrible people. They're a basket of deplorables. So-and-so on the TV told me.
To paint an entire group of people with such a broad generalization dismisses the complexity of every single individual, and it's never accurate to overgeneralize that way. Now, our brains do this so that we can navigate through reality. So, like, we think, those are rocks. Those look like sharp rocks. Be careful walking on them. Things like that. But when it comes to people, when it comes to our interactions with one another socially and psychologically, we don't have to compare. I love this quote by Christian Murray where he suggests, what would life be like to live without an ounce of comparison?
Yeah. Well, and interestingly enough, people are more variant within groups so they're more different within groups than the groups are different themselves. Mm-hmm. You can do this with any breaking down of groups. Like, look at a knitting circle. Okay, they're all knitters, and a knitting circle is very different than, say, like a group of blacksmiths that get together and blacksmith together. Obviously, it's knitting and blacksmithing, but the people within those groups are way different than, knitting and blacksmithing are creative things that you do physically, that you create things that we use. Mm-hmm. So but whereas like, you'll have, old Gertrude, and then Jane over here and all them, and Gertrude and Jane sometimes yell at each other because
one's an atheist and one is hardcore Catholic.
And then you have like a super hippie person over here and another, all in the same group. So it makes no sense to make broad group judgments. Yeah. Now, mind you, if you see a bunch of people walking around like this, like scratching themselves, and
it's overly simplistic, and it's easy to hate when you do that.
Yeah,
it's easy to hate, condemn, and it's also what we do when we're getting ready to inflict violence on one another, group to group. We start to dehumanize
Sure.
the other group
Yeah.
and say all of those people over there are so and so.
Yeah.
Blanket insult term.
Or I saw one person who fit some of the characteristics of a group, so therefore all of them, like say with the conservative, like there's that, the a-hole with the big truck and the boom boom care Blair and Leonard Skinner that's just ignorant and awful, but not all guys with trucks that like Leonard Skinner
Are like that
and
at
are
all.
conservative like that. So it's just like, yes, there are, but like you're kind of missing out on some good times if you're driving a truck, you hit a big old mud hole. There's a good times. There's good people on all sides of everything, but there's also buttheads on every side of things.
And there's extremists on both sides as well, and we got to be wary of that extreme fundamentalism to where people become a little bit cultish even sometimes.
And this works with the next part in my notes. We are all at war with agape. We think we can just do it ourselves. Well, just our group has the right way, and we can do it ourselves, or just me, I can do it. I don't need, I don't need to hear anything from anybody else. I got this. I can do it myself. And I mentioned, the manosphere and MGTOW and all that stuff. The dangers within that is it's so hyper individualistic that it sacrifices the group,
and it's
for the
too
self.
certain. It's closing itself off from love.
And then you can go the far other end, with the
pre-love to the extreme.
Well, I mean the alphabet, the alphabet. I don't, the LGBTQ plus IA, 2 IAA, and all that stuff. It's literally getting longer and longer, so it's fracturing people down into we're in this group, so but now we have now it's
I'm concerned for my gay lesbian and bisexual brothers and sisters because now they're actually being demoted.
No, but let me get this out.
A lot of their rights are being challenged.
Let me get this out though.
Go ahead.
It's important.
Oh yeah, you're talking. Go.
In this sense, we're creating so many smaller and smaller fractured identities that now there's no longer an individual or a group, because the individual is now broken down into 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 20 billion different little identities, opposed to really it should be, I'm a son because I'm the male child. So that's one identity, and I can identify with that with my family. I'm also a friend and a co-musician, but when we continuously go further and further and fracture it down, you lose the sense of the individual, and now you're just atomized pieces conglomerated together, and it's dangerous. And it's not just the LGBT people that
there
do
needs
this.
To be a
we do this as teenagers
fellowship.
too. I'm this
too.
kind of in this kind of. If you want to
do this in all of our group, and so it's sad that is not an actual community.
Yeah,
there's a lot of disagreements going on.
Sure.
Like here's a story, and I won't name the time and the place or anything, but this happened recently. But there's a group of lesbian women that get together for like a folk festival, and they play music together, and they just want female born people to be there.
XX chromosome.
Yes,
yeah.
XX chromosome to be there.
Yeah.
And this wasn't a problem until this most recent year.
Yeah.
And then there was a huge protest, and from the T's and the Q's, or advocates of the T's and the Q's, for instance. And so what are we doing? What are we doing? And again, like now we also see women sports being infiltrated by XY chromosomes sometimes, which are going to have advantage in very many cases, especially strength.
That's the danger of also changing the definitions of words and mushing them up. 1984 warned us about this.
So
changing, not just changing the meaning, but making it so it no longer has meaning.
Double speak.
Yeah. So if you are going to say have identifiers, we must be very clear. Yeah. Like it's not good enough to say, oh, they, like who's they though, but them or those. Okay, but who are you specifically talking about? Oh, I'm talking about those guys literally on the corner there that are assholes to me every morning. Like literally those guys. Being more descriptive instead of less descriptive. Yeah. But it's weird. We're in a spot.
What is the specific thing that somebody is doing that is offending you?
But what's really funny is we're getting more wordy, but the words don't make any more sense
specific.
For how we're describing. So we've got more words to be less specific. It's very odd. And I'm not getting down on anybody. I was the Q kid back in the day when they just, if you're a little weird, they'd be like queer, and it used to be a derogatory term towards people. So I always stuck up for the little weird theater kids and all that stuff. But what's happening now isn't a matter of acceptance or this, that, or the other. It's a matter of controlling people, either people who are say, in the communities themselves or people who are on the outside. And it's just to control our minds, to keep pitting us together.
Well, sure. It is being used that way, perhaps. And
oh no, for sure.
But the people that are involved in the supporting of these groups are merely trying to help do something that they think is good.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's how we get got. We were like, okay, I'm trying to do something good. Yeah, yes. It's like I'm trying to do something good, but then I'll use these words, which if, like, say you're a person in the crowd at an activist event and you say these words, there's a different meaning when you say it than when the people who really know what these words mean, like the way they use it. Like, so transformative, that sounds like a great thing. But if you hear professors, other than like talking about literally like transformative experiences, when they're talking about like transformative action for society and stuff like that, watch out, because they're not using that word.
They're talking about destroying. Yeah, and breaking.
Yeah,
there's no idea of what to transform into.
What's the German word?
Unless it's communism, I guess. But
well, that
is only slowly admitted by some people that actually believe in it, and the other ones are just kind of on the fence, not knowing exactly where to go there. But
well, it's
just still want to be a part of the group, so agreeing with most of what's happening, being quiet where they don't understand.
If I could be conspiratorial, I would say all this is to usher in the dictatorship of the proletariat, the awakened class.
I think the confusion around sex and gender and race is definitely being used as a part of information war.
Well, yeah, and like, because
it can be used by certain power structures to try and further divide and cause infighting amongst us, because we actually have the most beautiful melting pot on the planet.
Yeah, well, that's the one thing, is the German communists.
That is what made America great. So we should love each other for our differences. We shouldn't be infighting so much, but we are being tricked into infighting, even within the LGBTQ community, right? Which you would think we'll be getting along. Even within America, we should be agreeing on the ideals of America.
Well, if you look at what's happening with conservative media, particularly like independent media and sub-independent media, that's also fracturing down to an infighting as well.
Yeah. If there's aspects of America that we can prove are corrupted, then we should be able to agree on that by looking at the proof together objectively, and then trying to find a way to resolve it as a people, and recognize that the real battle is not left versus right. It's the proletariat and the middle classes against the high-level oligarchy.
The plebeians, not the proletariat. Excuse me. The proletariat is the awakened ones. So
the awakened ones. In 1984, they called them the proles, the proletariat, which just means poor people.
Okay, well, so the proletariat in communism is, yes.
On communism, they call them the awakened ones. Yeah.
So when the proletariat are the ones who are going to have a class consciousness awakening, and then usher in the dictatorship of the proletariat to usher in socialism. Yes. So the German communists that came to America and founded what is it? The man, mine's blanking, but there, it was an institute of thought. They realized that America is so class fluid that the proletariat can't be a class, so it's not, the bourgeois versus the plebeians on the bottom. So what do we do in order to usher in this dictatorship of the proletariat to then get to our socialistic end? Well, we have to figure out other ways to separate people. If you're in a society that's very class mobile, like America is, because we used to, and I think we still are to a certain extent, very meritocratic. Yeah. Like, we learned that, like, judging people on their skin color or their sex or stuff. No, we want the best of the best of the best of the best.
Best doctor, doesn't matter what he looks like, what he believes, as long as he's a decent, good human being, of course.
And the best astronauts, the best pilots. We want the best of the best. So what you have to do is you have to fracture people down and get them to care less about the merit of people and more about, well, do they look like me or do they not look like me?
You want to start teaching them equity instead of equality.
Yeah, and that's dangerous. And how often do you hear, and not to go on a tangent, but this stuff's been bothering me, but you'll hear black and brown bodies, or it's so good to see somebody who looks like me in a lead role or something like that. That's very destructive. And on the surface, it's like, oh, well, yeah. But no, if you really listen to what they're saying, though, black and brown bodies, they don't care about the individual. It's just the body. Like this MLK statue, the embrace, really pissed me off. Not because it looks like they're holding up a schlong, but because they took the heart and the mind and the love out of it. And now it's just two arms grasping onto each other. So they've ruined and perverted this just something as simple and beautiful as an embrace by removing the core of what is being
Martin
embraced.
got it, man. He understood agape.
Yeah, and he passed it on. You know, there's a reason why he was so
believed in
powerful and his
loving
movements
one
really
another.
worked. You know,
Yeah.
it's not just
The poor people, both black and white, coming together and recognizing that we have been infiltrated by a demonic suction tool, as he called it when he was referring to the military-industrial complex.
Oh yeah, demonic
The business
suction
of war that has taken over our country, the business of war that Thomas Paine warned us about early in our country's founding. He's like, that there are men in all countries who get their living by war is as shocking as it is true, but it becomes all the more unpardonable when those men seek to sow discord amongst nations to further enrich themselves. Thomas Paine, back in the 1700s, man, like on point. And so we had that problem already in early America. We saw that there was a challenge of moneyed powers that were trying to put themselves in the position of influence and to be able to control and push this government where it wanted, even against the will of the people and the better interests of the people. And this has been going on all over the world for a long time.
Oh, that's
so we have to find ways to correct for this, because the free market is great because it allows even poor people to be allowed to trade finally and to have maybe some class mobility and some upward mobility and involvement in the culture. Like, we didn't used to have a free market. Like, most people weren't like trading on the open market and able to achieve any kind of upward movement out of their class.
For most of humanity and advanced more advanced civilization didn't have the idea of ownership. And by ownership, I mean something that's yours, that you're going to sustain and you're going to work on, like your land, that then you can hand over to somebody, like your child. And
that's what we're trying to figure out how to regain, our sense of a shared commons, like this planet and the lands that we inhabit and that we live on together. We should be taking care of our water. It should not be polluted by local, local industries. And our failure as stewards is what has caused this. But of course, this is also part of our growth process. How are we going to get everything perfect on the first go around? You ever played a hard video game and beaten it without dying once and just made it through? That's not how life works. That's not how evolution works. We're learning as we go. So we just got to be honest and look at what's happening in the world. How can we find ways to be able to compromise and reach conciliation with each other and figure out these great problems together? Because we need all the minds that we can working together.
It seems like we are going through a transformation, much as Saul did, turning into Paul.
As a whole species,
we are becoming very, very, or we're at a point where we're very destructive and throwing the stones at each other. But at the same time, we're also having this, blast that's flooring us and blinding us, and then realizing the person that I put all my hate, or a group of people I put all my hate and my distrust in, are actually the ones helping me a lot. Like they call it being red pilled. It's very, very bad. It's matrix and all that stuff.
It's a matrix metaphor. Yeah.
Not a not blue versus red. Not
blue versus red as in politics.
Yeah, but
red and blue pill. The one is going to make you wake up.
It's the bitter pill that realizes like, I am being like this person that I didn't really like. A good example for me is I didn't really like Russell Brand a lot, like back when he was an actor doing his thing for various reasons, but I put aside a lot of that, once he started doing, more of his political and social commentary, and then warmed up to it, and it was like, oh, well, damn, you are
Brand's
crazy, super liberal hippie, but, like, you're on point and you got a good freaking heart and you're helping people.
Yeah, and he's always been that way, but he was also
on a lot of drugs,
flamboyant,
and on a lot of drugs. I think that's what did it for me.
And I don't know how long ago he quit, but it was some time ago now.
Yeah.
And he's become one of the greatest political commentators on YouTube.
So
his stuff is great, and I love the fact that he's able to talk about everything that's going on socially and politically. He can talk about the wokeism and everything else that's going on. He can talk about corporatism. He can talk about GMO food products, but he does it without being left or right. He's just like this very spiritual guy that loves all human beings. We're all awakening together. And hello, my 5 million friends, all of us awakening together and creating a more beautiful, loving world, blah, blah, blah. And then he goes into some deep politics. But it's always from this very loving, compassionate standpoint, and I think that's very wise of him.
Yeah.
And he's done a good job of being able to check his own ego while still maintaining a powerful character through which to act.
But yeah, so at this point right now, I think we're just like Saul, we're going into the desert, which is a process of radical reflection. Now we're really reflecting against ourselves, you know, and coming to terms with the ugly rod that is in my own eye.
Yes.
Opposed to the speck in another's.
Yeah, we keep focusing on others, and if we were all just working on being better people ourselves, what a wonderful world it would be.
And hopefully, and I think it's probably going to sooner or later, but we're going to be coming out of this desert in this transformational, experiential way, where our understanding, and we've done it with like, you know, like media is very different now. Our understanding of how information is gathered, if like you're somebody who participates in independent media and stuff, like you're on it. You know what's happening long before you see all the legacy media picking up the story.
Yeah.
And then you get to a point where you're seeing it, where you see it before, you know, even the independent guys are picking it up, and you start to get in it. Your understanding in this case, as an analogy of the news and what's going on in the world as it happens, has completely transformed. It's no longer something that's fed to you. It's something that you go out and find, and you're just used to doing that.
Yeah. I highly recommend try and find the good faith actors. Find a good faith conservative reporter. Find a good faith liberal reporter. Find a good faith progressive. Find a good faith whatever, like libertarian. Go through and find multiple sources that you find to be honestly intended in the way that they report. You can tell that they're trying to do a good job. They might see the world a little bit differently from you, but you can tell that they're honest in their intentionality. That's what you're looking for. And then you can get a much broader view of what's happening in the world, a much more accurate view of what is happening in each situation as it's being reported. If you just watch CNN or just read New York Times or just watch Fox News, you're going to have a very radically different view from your fellow human beings, and that's very disorienting for our cultures and for us, and it causes more damage and destruction and pain in the world. We need to figure out how to operate together and make sense together again.
Yeah. So this state of, you know, agapic love is essentially the framework and foundations of at least Western society, but it has become an ossified hard surface that is walked upon in contempt.
Yeah. And
so we're seeing a rebellion against it, you know, like, you know, atheists and Satanists and, well, the alphabet, not the people, but the weird movement and all the language behind that is actually based on inverse Christianity, the way they word things and antagonistic towards it. But Christianity is the very thing that allowed it to exist and allow us to be able to be like, okay, you're gay, cool, love you just the same, man.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, and all that stuff. But now we have sophists everywhere, as well as sages everywhere, and figuring out who is who. And it's not so easy too, because, you know, like there are people who can say very good things where you're like, yeah, that's awesome. But then as you look over time, you see how it's, you know, say this fictitious individual is skewing things in a very negative direction. And it's hard to, you know, separate the sages from the sophists now, because there's just so much coming at us.
Yeah.
And
well, you can tell the sages because they're going to be telling you, they're going to be talking like Bob Marley. They're going to be talking about one love.
Well,
they're not going to be stereotyping whole groups of individuals. And
well, it's hard. You know, it's hard to say not another. Why do you think so many people have fallen for all this junk philosophy and all this junk stuff? Is because they, you know, like why people fall for, like, you know, I do yoga to get spiritual, but it's not actually yoga and all that stuff. But or why people get into cults.
Because we've lost shared moral traditions by which we can actually tell what is good and bad together, what is honest, what is true.
It's domicile.
Like you were saying, we're losing even shared meanings, and we're all in our own reality tunnels.
Yeah.
And we're not interested in seeing other people's points of view. We're not interested in giving their point of view a credible take. We're holding contempt prior to investigation. And that is going to cloud our objective thinking massively. It destroys I mean, this is the scientific process. You're trying to you're trying to challenge your own hypotheses. This is how we try and check ourselves as humans, because we know that we have trouble being objective. So the methodology here to employ then is be willing to even prove yourself wrong in those beliefs that you're most attached to, and be willing to challenge everything that you believe. Try and disprove it, because really we want to know what is true and good for all of us together, for one and all. So it's a little bit of shift of orientation, but this as Vervaeke has explained to us in multiple episodes now, he's broken down how love is not an emotion, it's an orientation.
Yep.
It's a mode of being.
Yep.
It's an existential mode that we can take on, and it's a way that we can approach reality and interact with reality. And that love is, this kind of agape love is an unconditional love. It's a non-egocentric love. It's not trying to act, it's not acting out of fear and self-protection. It is literally surrendering its own self-interests for the sake of others.
Yeah.
And that is a very powerful mode when cultures start to practice that together in fellowship.
So I'm gonna jump ahead just for
Yeah.
time's sake a little bit. So
Yeah, we're going on
what
here.
what Paul did is Paul was trying to, well, ultimately Paul put his own shadow on God. So he needed rules and laws and order, and there was very much a guilt standard for him.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but God in his mind was also compassion and love. So in order to forgive our, call it, the original sin, but forgive us breaking moral codes, Jesus sacrificed himself so God would forgive us. And
Yeah.
and so Vervaeke's point is, that kind of, well, I'm not going to say exactly what his point, but what I gathered from his point was that kind of diminishes agape, because it puts, well, there has to be guilt for forgiveness to happen, and that's not the case.
That's right.
So how do we tap into all that as agape without the machinery of Christianity?
Mm-hmm.
How to be a saint without God? It's quite absurd. But I think it still needs to be done, because, it's not about worshiping Jesus. It's about living as what he was trying, like the point he was trying to, like, really understanding the point he was trying to get at, so much so that he died to get that point across.
Yes. This love that does not envy, does not boast, is not self-seeking, records no wrongs, rejoices in truth, always perseveres. Agape love cannot fail, because we are born out of it. Our personhood is the result of it. It's what helps bring out the humanity in others around us.
And the last bit of my notes, and I'm going to share this because
God is agape. God is love. That's where that idea comes from. It's in relationship that we know and we are known.
But we still have the grammar of God, but don't believe it anymore.
Yes.
We're still using the language, but don't believe it. And that's kind of what I was getting at with now, like, words don't mean anything anymore, because now they mean, they have infinite meaning and no meaning at all. And I won't say, directly, like, all of it's being, like, pushed by some secret cabal of people. That, of course, that's absurd. But our natural tendencies not being checked, and then people realizing,
it is a vector of attack that some powered interest will use when they see the opportunity.
Well,
they'll pour gasoline on a flame.
The river's not sending ships up your way to burn your city. It's just there, and the ships have figured out that there's a point at which you can go up the river and come and burn your city down.
Yeah.
The river's not doing it.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good way to put it.
But
so Saul had an inner civil war, basically. He became Paul when he realized that, as you suggested, that the conflict that he had within himself, because he was someone that really strongly believed in law and order, and he saw God as law and order, he put that on God. And as a result, we should be condemned, or we should think of ourselves as being condemned by his judgment. That was Saul's effect on Christianity, because he was this guy that was very obsessed with order and law, and he had a lot of
Paul's at this point.
When he was Saul, before he became Paul. So the old Saul was guilty, rejected, disconnected.
Yeah.
The new Paul's loving connection. But initially,
But the new Paul is still corrupted by the old.
Oh, no, you're right. But the new
Saul.
Paul still carries a little bit of the old Saul. You're right. Yeah. Because he did see God as law and justice and order. And he comes up with this idea that we are condemned by his judgment. So yet he also loves us. So there's this weird
Yeah.
paradox going on there that doesn't quite add up in this case.
Yeah, but
And that influenced Christianity for centuries.
Sure, and not
our interpretation of
yeah,
that.
not all sects of Christianity take the whole praise and punishment thing as literally true. As others do. That's something, Christianity is a multi-fractured faith.
Yes.
You have the Catholics and then the Protestants. And the Protestants you have, well, a lot. Let's just say a lot. I mean, there's a lot of Protestant, churches and Reformationist congregations and Puritans and very open and liberal rock and roll band, everything,
Oh, yeah. There's a big hippie Christian movement in the 60s. It was pretty radical.
But
so, Christianity becomes a home as a result, though, of how Paul was seeing it. For those with the sense of falling short, those who have not yet come into fullness and personhood. And so all of the dispossessed, this sold Christianity even better, even though this was kind of a misunderstanding. But the idea that Christianity is for the orphans, for the widows, for the dispossessed, for the poor, it's for everybody.
For all the non-persons,
everybody
non-citizens.
deserves to feel and act in process with God's love.
It makes it very dangerous to those who were in power, and I can understand why.
Yeah. And that aspect of it is good, but it was his projection that Jesus' sacrifice was to satisfy God's sense of justice, that we get this idea of God as a judging ruler that.
And I'm sure as we get into this, next episode and further episodes talking about Gnostics, and eventually he does talk about Hegel.
Yes, because they thought that there was some kind of, there's some kind of war going on, or some kind of disagreement between justice and agape in God. Like God was somehow contradictory, and so this was missing something. Paul was still missing something.
Yeah, which like what I said before the cast.
Albert,
like all the none of the philosophers were completely right, but their psychotechnologies can be valid and quite useful.
We're narrowing
as we
in.
exapt them and change them a little bit and make them a little bit better. It's like the first wood drill was actually a stick with a pointy thing, but we refined it, and now we have all different kinds. But so Paul, to forgive him for his shadow trying to blot out the light of God, because I do think that's quite the offense to think of God as wrathful, and somebody has to die so you could be forgiven. Yeah, I don't like that.
Yeah,
it doesn't vibe with me. It's not anything I've experienced with, but the psychotechnology he's developing, to counter these two opposing Saul and Paul's within himself are valid. Well, how do I bring this together? Okay, well, I got the story of, the story of Jesus and his sacrifice is almost a psychotechnology in and of itself. It's exapted from story psychotechnologies and metaphor.
That's exactly how Vervaeke describes it too, with the early Israelites and the Jews, that they believed us to be involved in a cosmic narrative that we were co-creating with God. So this is that idea being carried forth, and I guess that brings us up to now.
Sorry, that was a long intro, but we covered a lot of stuff and trying to merge what we're learning from stuff in the past to where the relevancies are to where we're at now, and trying to draw parallels. And I know it's touchy and uncomfortable a lot of times, but we do have to talk about these touchy, uncomfortable things and do it with as much agapic and filial, and in some cases eros love. We need to love the experience of doing it, love the people that we're doing it with, and let the love move through.
Let the love move through us,
and through us.
Carry the beauty forward, as my good friend Gary Burgle likes to say. So this is going to be episode 17 of Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. Gnosis and Existential Inertia.
Welcome back to Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. Last time we tried something somewhat pretentious. I hope it was still valuable. We endeavored to discuss the contributions to the notions of meaning and wisdom that were made by the advent of Christianity. In particular, we looked at Jesus of Nazareth and the exemplification, right, of this participatory knowing in God's agapic creativity, this forgiving of personhood to others. John's radical idea that God is in fact this agape, that is actually what we've always been talking about when we've been talking about God. And then Paul's radical personalization of this, and how the metanoia of his own transformation is seen by him as a powerful instance of this gnosis, agape, but how that also carried with it a potential dark side in which elements of his identity get projected onto cosmic history, and the idea of inner conflict within history, within God, as being reflected of and reflected in his own inner conflict between the old Saul and the new Paul, and how much this gnosis, participatory knowing, is bound up with an exploration and an understanding of how our agency can be fractured, how we can be at war with ourselves, how we can suffer. And I want to take this up because the notion of how we can suffer, how we can become at war with ourselves, how our agency can be undermined, and how much cosmic forces may be aligned with our suffering becomes a central idea amongst a group of people known, or at least called by their enemies, the Gnostics. Now, there's a lot of controversy about whether or not this is a useful theoretical construct. There might have been some Gnosis communities. It's more apt to think of Gnosticism as a style, a way of thinking, like existentialism or fundamentalism, right? It's you don't go to like a fundamentalist a church. You belong to a branch of Christianity that might be fundamentalist, right? It's a way of orienting yourself that is not like belonging to a particular community or a particular political or socioeconomic group. Nevertheless, this sense, right, of inner conflict, this sense of, right, losing agency, the sense of the importance of gnosis and agape are all made central to this style, this movement. Now, before I talk about them in particular, I want to reverse how I want to present this. What I want to do is, instead of trying to historically teach you about them first, I want to try and make clear to you from the inside, so to speak, what Gnosis is and how you are probably at some point seeking it, or will be seeking it, or have sought it in your life. And then once we get this existential understanding of what Gnosis is, then through that lens, I think it is more appropriate to try and understand the historical figures. The Gnostics are sort of, I don't know what to say, sexy, hot right now. A lot of conspiracy theories and Dan Brown kind of crap around all of this. And I think that's the wrong way. You don't really understand the Gnostics, right, as a movement unless you understand what Gnosis is itself. This is going to turn out to be important because I think a way we can understand the Gnostics is they are the axial revolution within the axial revolution. They are the attempt to take the axial revolution to its culmination, to its rational culmination. And they are going to provide the undercurrent to Western culture's understanding of its spiritual history and direction. So for a long time you won't hear me talk about the Gnostics because, like I did when I was talking about the Buddha's enlightenment, and we did a lot of cognitive science on higher states of consciousness, I want to try and do some significant cognitive science before we turn back to the history. So let's work our way into what this is. We've already got some sense of what this is. We've had a lot of discussion of participatory knowing and perspectival knowing, and Gnosis has both of those elements in it, of transformative experience. We're going to try and draw this all together. But let's work our way into this. So we've talked about a worldview, and a worldview is when you have this deeply integrated, dynamically coupled way of seeing yourself, your agency, and seeing the world as an arena. You have this bi-directional modeling. It is simultaneously modeling the world to you and modeling you to shape the world. This mutual conformity, this reciprocal revelation, right? So that's a worldview. Now, this has happened to me, and I hope something similar has happened to you. Perhaps when you're reading a book, a novel, or I'll use an example. I'm reading the works of a particular philosopher. Let's say it's Spinoza, right? And I'll be reading, and Spinoza's a profound and deep thinker, and you spend a lot of time, and you're reading the arguments, and you're trying to understand, and you can come to follow the arguments. You can come to follow the inferences. You can even come to believe some of Spinoza's conclusions. And so you have a lot of beliefs, and they don't even have to be inchoate. They can be sort of systematically related together. But then something else happens. Sometimes, not always, but it's happened to me multiple occasions. And it's often what I'm trying to convey above and beyond what I'm saying when I'm teaching other people. I'm reading Spinoza, and it's like there's this change. I go from seeing what Spinoza is saying to seeing things the way Spinoza says. Right? Spinoza goes from something I believe what Spinoza's saying there and there and there and there about the world and about what it is to be a human being. I go from that to actually seeing the world Spinozistically. It's because, Spinoza is now, to use a metaphor I've used before, is now the lens by which I'm both seeing the world and myself. I'm now living the world like as if Spinoza was an adverb. I'm living the world Spinozistically. I have the perspective of what it is like to see the world the way Spinoza did, and what it is like to participate in that worldview. You get this advent of the viability, the livability of a worldview. James talks about that. He talks about the difference, William James, the great psychologist and philosopher, he talks about the difference between believing things and it actually being a live option to you. So what happens there is, at least for some period of time, right, the agent-arena relationship, the perspectival and the participatory knowing are now, right, conformed to, at least it seems to me to be that way, to what Spinoza had, not just what, right, Spinoza said, who and what Spinoza was and what his world was to him has become available to me. Now that's important because that viability, that ability to enter into a particular agent arena configuration will help me to take the next step forward. Right? So John Wright talks a lot about sensibility transcendence. And he talks about it, and this is based on the really important work of Iris Murdoch, and just an absolute gem of a book called The Sovereignty of the Good. If you read 10 books in your life, one of them should be The Sovereignty of the Good. Your life will be less if you have not read it. So Murdoch was trying to get beyond sort of the rules and reasons for morality to something much more important. She was trying to get to that viability of morality, the way in which we pay attention in such a way that our salience landscape and the agent-arena relationship is transformed such that we do the good. But let's use Murdoch's particular example. There's a mother-in-law. She has a son. The son is married to a woman, and she doesn't like this woman. The mother-in-law doesn't like the woman. It's obviously the mother-in-law to the daughter-in-law. She doesn't like this woman because she finds her coarse, finds her loud, finds her kind of uncouth. And therefore, beneath the sort of elegance and dignity of her son. And then, think about agape and forgiving here. Think about agape and forgiving. But what happens here, at some point, Murdoch says, and it happens like an insight. It happens like when you come out of the 9-dot problem. The mother-in-law realizes something. Now, and Murdoch is clear about this. It's not a normal insight. Like in a normal insight, we reframe how we're looking at something. I reframe how I look at the 9 dots. But what's actually happening is the mother-in-law is having a bidirectional insight. She's not only reframing how she sees the world, she's reframing how she sees herself. And these are happening in a completely interfused manner. This is a participatory change. The agent, both the agent and the arena side of the relationship are being co-changed together. So it's not a reframing of this or that. I often use this term, it's a transframing. It's not a reframing of a particular problem, it's a transformation of the whole framing process, both ends. Because what's happening is the mother-in-law is seeing the daughter-in-law not as coarse but as spontaneous, not as uncouth but sincere, not as lacking in elegance but as possessing authenticity. And then she's simultaneously, in a co-determining fashion, realizing that the way that she, the mother-in-law, has framed things habitually has been wrong. She's having what we've talked about before, that systematic insight, not just an insight here and here, but there's a whole system of errors that she's transforming. She's going through that kind of developmental transformation that we've talked about. Wright calls this sensibility transcendence, because what's happening simultaneously is, right, the daughter-in-law can be something that she couldn't be before, and the mother-in-law is becoming somebody she couldn't become before. She couldn't be before. These two things are happening together. Her sensibility, her whole way of participating in a worldview, an agent-arena relationship, is being transformed. And so both things are going through transcendence. Do you see this? Here's herself, and here's, right, the daughter, the object of her attention, and this is going through self-transcendence, but so is this, and that's happening in a completely conjoined way. The mother, right, the mother-in-law is becoming what she couldn't be because of how she is, right, opening up what the daughter-in-law can be. And precisely because she's coming to, right, have a radical insight into what the daughter-in-law could be, right, opening up that, she's opening up what she can be. It's again this process of participatory knowing, reciprocal revelation, right? And it's, this mutually accelerating disclosure, this knowing by loving. It's a sensibility transcendence. So notice what's happening here. There's a way, right? You can see that I can go through a process like this and enter into a worldview. And of course, that's what Christianity was offering, right? It was offering people that metanoia of how they can go through this radical transformation in this way, opening up the world, opening up themselves, etc. Now, why is that important? Because now I want you to think of the opposite. Your inability to enter into or make viable to yourself a new way of being. Now, in order to get to that, let me bring up again somebody we've spoken before, Harry Frankfurt. Remember, he's the person who talked about bullshit. Frankfurt also talks about how, a wonderful book, Reasons for Love, and the importance of what we care about, how much our reasoning depends on what we love, what we care about, how we're bound into an agent-arena relationship. Now, Frankfurt brings up an important notion. He brings up a notion he calls, I don't quite like this word, but to be fair to him, I can't think of a better word. He calls the unthinkable. So let me give you an example of this. So the way to think of the unthinkable is, although you can make thoughts, images, propositions, run inferences, you can't actually make it viable. You can't go through the sensibility transcendence that would bring you into living that worldview. So here's my example. My oldest son currently lives with me, and this has been such a blessing for me. I get to live with him and spend time with him as he's building his career. Right? Now, I can think this thought. It would be great if I kicked Jason out. I can run this thought through my head. Because if I did, then the apartment would be clean, I'd have more money, I can imagine what it would look like, I can run the thought, right? I can drive all the inferences. But what I can't do is actually make this a viable alternative for me. It's, in that way, the thought, it's unthinkable to me. My love for my son doesn't mean I can't run these thoughts, imagine these scenes, draw these inferences. I can do all of that. What I can't do is bring myself to live in that world. It's unthinkable to me. Perhaps a better way of thinking about it is it's not viable to me. It's unlivable for me. Now that's a good thing, right? So do you see how I have a way, right, a sensibility transcendence with my son that means there's no effort on my part to treat him morally. And I'm not trying to be self-congratulatory. What I'm trying to say is, right, doing that thing of kicking him out, which I think would ultimately be an immoral act, is not viable to me. So right now, this is all really great, but there's a way in which this can be twisted. I want you to now think of the negative of it. Right? What if you're stuck? You're stuck in a worldview you don't want to be in. You want to go over there, to that worldview. But you can't. You can't go through the sensibility transcendence that will make that worldview viable to you. Because you can run inferences in your head. You can imagine scenes. You can state things to yourself. You can make all kinds of affirmations. Won't get you there. You're stuck. You can't go through that change. You experience a kind of existential inertia. People often enter therapy for exactly this reason. They can state who they want to be and what kind of world they want to be in. They can imagine it. They can make inferences of what it would be, right, like if they were there. They can deeply want to be there. But they don't get there. They stay stuck. I want to stop getting in these horrible romantic relationships. I want to be in a relationship that is deep and profound. It would be so good. I can imagine myself there. I can see myself. But I can't get there. Every time I try to get there, I end up here again. Every time. Somehow, and I don't understand how, the way I'm caring about things, the way I'm participating in myself and my world is preventing me from making that way of life a viable option to me. I want to be there. Think about Paul and the old man and the new man. I want to be there. I want to be that person living there. But all my efforts to get there circle me back to here. I just can't get out of this existential inertia. I don't know how to bring about the sensibility transcendence that's going to make that way, that person, and that world viable to me. How do I get there? How do I get there? How do I stop suffering? So one thing that can happen to people is they can lose their agency. Remember, that's what suffering means, because they're stuck like this. They're losing any sense of how to get to that other worldview, that other self. They're experiencing radical existential inertia. Carl Jung used to talk about the primary thing that people would have to get to and have to express, and why they would come into therapy was precisely because they felt stuck. It might not even be that there are particular concrete problems in their life. It might be that everything's actually going kind of well, but they're stuck. They're stuck. They're thwarted. There's a sense of they're not moving, and they should be. And although they can talk and draw images and make inferences about how they should move and where they should move to, they don't have the participatory perspectival knowing. They don't know how to get there. They don't know how to engage in the sensibility transcendence. They don't know how to bring about the transframing. And often they enter into therapy, and therapy has an agapic element into it. The therapist is affording an agapic transformation. But in addition to being stuck because of existential inertia, there's another problem people face when they are seeking, when they need significant transformation. And this goes to the heart of...
All right, we're back. Well, that was...
Excuse me. Whew.
So that's a good introduction. Before we even get into defining Gnosis more specifically, he's helping us understand how we can become fractured in that war within ourselves.
Yeah, so we went over what worldview means. It's the integration of self, agency, and arena. So
The way that we see ourselves and the way we see the world.
Yes.
Yeah. So that mutual conformity, that reciprocal revelation or realization that can occur. Like, we can come to follow ideas and beliefs, but sometimes there can be a change to seeing through that way of being. So the Socratic way of being, rather than just reading and believing in what Socrates is talking about, we start to see through Socrates' eyes and to experience life through that worldview.
Yeah,
that we have this ability to have that participatory knowing and take on different agent arena relationships.
Yeah, the way I summed that up is seeing what is said, and then moving into seeing as what is said.
Yes, there you go.
You know,
Yeah.
So like in this case, he's talking about a guy, but you could be very well. We're adverbalizing it, if you will, and that's not a word, I know, but
Yeah, it's the difference between actually believing something and that being a livable opportunity that you can act out, right?
And that's what he means by viability. Is
Viability,
it livable? You know, like, okay.
It becomes available. Yeah, it's livable.
Well, actually, that makes sense, because like when we talk about like seeds being viable, like is it able to live?
Yeah.
Is it livable?
So this term, sensibility transcendence, is beautiful. I love that. So we have the book, The Sovereignty of the Good by Iris Murdoch. I'm gonna have to get that because that sounds really good.
If you get that, let me read it after you.
No doubt.
But I have a note just at the beginning of this. It's not an argument for the reason of morality, but the viability, the livability of morality.
Yes, beyond the rules and reasons to the actual potential for transforming our agent arena relationships. So instead of just believing in the good, it's becoming instinctually like something that we act out.
You are living in joy. You are living in what is good. You are living as
Which seems to be the optimal
ultimately
state for
we
humans.
want to live in joy, right? That's like, we call it happiness and the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness, but really happiness is joy, and joy is what is good.
To bring up Bob Marley again, why did so many people love Bob Marley? He exuded joy so much, so much joy, so much celebration of being.
So he went over this story, and I'm gonna sum it up real quick and have you add notes in after it. So there's a mom. She's got a son. She doesn't like the son's wife. She finds her very abrasive, and she's got lots of words, whether she's uncouth or brash or all these, we'll call them negative descriptors. And she thinks that daughter brings her son down, is below him.
Yeah.
But moving through an agapic experience, she is now not using, say, the words like, brash and whatever. She's using the more positive thing. Oh, she's spontaneous, and so it's flipping from negative mindset descriptions to more of the positive.
Yeah, she's seen the truth of it now, and she's seen another perspective.
Yeah, and what that's doing is it's not only just changing the mother's
perception of the girl,
but also changing the girl and of herself, just by because the mother's seeing the girl as this thing, and at first it was this despicable, I don't like her, but now the mother's changing, and now the mother's perception of the girl is changing.
It's enabling the girl to transcend more, because the stepmother, seeing her anew now, and so she's acting differently. So there's more room, there's more affordances for growth. She's also the mother. In seeing the positive attributes and that switch that occurs from negative thinking to positive recognition, she recognizes how she was wrong too.
Yep.
So there's this two sides of ratcheting it up, and in seeing that, she starts to celebrate who the daughter is, and in that celebration, that creates the daughter more room to express and self-transcend herself. And in the celebration by the mother, she gets to further grow and transcend. And so there's this transframing, this radical, not just reformation, not just reframing, but transframing, a bilateral insight that is mutually reciprocal feedback loop.
Yeah, it's not the breaking and making of a new frame, but the transcending from one's previous frame.
I like how he said it's agent and arena being co-changed together.
become more by
Yes.
by opening up ways of being. So you're becoming more by opening more, giving yourself and others more affordances within the way to be.
Yeah, you're transforming your whole relational framework with others in reality, and your own. You're having this systematic insight. You're recognizing a whole system of errors that was occurring in one's own psychology and one's own thinking, and so that is being transcended. That is sensibility transcendence.
Yes.
We have sensibilities, and we're transcending our sensibilities now.
And in the case of this mother, she is now, I would say, before she was in a knowing by, this person's a whatever, but now it's knowing by loving, and through this knowing by loving is able to transcend
instead
the
of noticing
original
by
framing.
prejudgment and projection and this and that, she's now knowing by loving, which is that mutually accelerated disclosure, as Vervaeke described in a previous episode. What love is, a mutually accelerated disclosure. It's the honesty and the openness that helps accelerate each other's honesty and openness back and forth, and it just ratchets up.
Yeah, and so reasoning depends on what we love and how we care. And this gets us into the unthinkable, things that are unthinkable. And we can run the thoughts and the circumstances in our head all we want, but if it's not a viable, livable thing, it's unthinkable. It's not viable. It's unlivable. Unthinkable could be, you could call it not viable and unlivable.
Not viable. I couldn't do that.
Like, because you can think about all the experiences. Yeah, like you could kick him out and he could have that guest bedroom for his office or whatever. But really, it's like, it's not really a livable option for him.
Yeah.
A, it would be morally wrong for him. B, he's getting a lot by having his son there and helping him somehow.
And even if he can imagine the steps and how nice it would be in some aspects of it, he still can't bring himself to do it. So it's like a positive stuckness.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool that there's that side of it too. There's unthinkable things that we just couldn't see ourselves.
And then there's the twisted negative of that, the stuckness with a lot of existential inertia. So you can tell yourself about all the things that you want. Well, I want this, and I know I should do this, and I know I should be doing this and all this stuff, but you just can't seem to make the change, and it keeps looping you back to where you're at.
I've experienced this with cigarettes for years. There's like this inertia to this habit. It's been going on for the half of my life now, and it's so difficult to overcome that inertia. Yeah, and so I know exactly what he means there. That's really well said.
Yeah, the solution or a portion of the solution is changing how you care about yourself in the world.
Yes.
So instead of bringing it back to that same here that you were at before, that you're in stuckness at, you're changing how, like, very personally how you care, just like the mother was, how she cared, what she cared about herself, and how she, because ultimately she cares about her son.
Yeah.
But now she can embrace the stepdaughter because,
And it might have been triggered by the daughter's agapic love towards her husband. She was just having fun with the husband one day, and they were loving and being very funny with each other or whatever. And then she starts to see her as endearing, the way that she's taking good care of her son and loving him well as he loves her. This is a funny little side, but I was hanging out with my grandmother this morning. I went to see her, and we were going to go out and have breakfast, but she's 93 years old, so she's really getting up in age. And some mornings she has trouble even walking without her walker, and her legs are very, very weak, and her back pain is immense all the time. So she didn't want to go out this morning, but she still wanted to see me, so I went and picked up some breakfast for us in town, and went by the house, and we're eating, and she's telling me this story about this so relates to the story that Iris Murdoch shares in the book. What was the name of that again? The Sovereignty of the Good. So my grandfather's mother did not like my grandmother at all. Same way. She was really nasty about her. And so they lived in a house where the walls were very thin, or her mother, or his mother, I'm sorry. And when they were visiting her one night after they had just gotten married, she was telling my grandfather, his mom, was saying, "Why did you marry that Thane?"
Oh, God.
Thane. Called her a Thane. And it so hurt my grandmother's heart. And And so, I'm sure she remembered that for years. Well, when that woman finally passed on, a long time later in their lives together, she gave all her clothes to my grandmother. And my grandmother's a very small lady, like, she's probably around 100 pounds at this
Oh
point.
yeah, she's tiny.
Yeah. And but my grandfather's mother was actually kind of a larger lady. She was around 200. Now she had sisters and other family members she could have given those clothes to, but she gave them to my grandmother. And it's like at some point she had that sensibility transcendence. She realized that they really loved each other and she's really good for him. And she, somehow,
Even though she may not have been able
she saw that
to
she was
admit
wrong.
it,
She couldn't admit it her
outward.
whole life, but until she passed away, she gave this gift.
Well, so yeah, that stuckness that we can get in is definitely to be avoided because it will rob you of your agency, and you'll feel powerless. And like, particularly like,
Well, yeah, in that case, like my grandmother's stepmother never got to have,
well,
a loving relationship with her.
and then also think about the weight of holding
that's not
such
stepmother's in-law.
mother-in-law.
Mother-in-law, thank you.
But that's a heavy weight to hold too, so it sticks you, and it get like that. Like I have a tendency of telling people, it's like, look, you can hate me all you want or whatever, but that's a you problem, and you're gonna have to carry that weight.
Yeah, right.
And
That's
I'm
a
only
good
saying
way.
that because I can't carry the weight of hating other people anymore. Like now, mind you, there are people I'd just rather not hang out with, but
Yeah, but
You know,
other
just
people's
you do you.
inconsistencies, their cruelty, their nastiness, their anger, their insults, that's their shit.
yeah,
That's their stuff.
Yeah.
They can deal with that.
you
I
do
don't,
you, boo.
I'm
Yeah.
going to work on me. I don't have to worry about what's going on in other people's heads. That's
And so
very
my
helpful
last
way to approach life.
little note on this section is just so even if they, the people that are experiencing the stuckness of their existential inertia, even if they can think of how they should or could be, they don't actually know how. And
don't know
I'm
how.
using the word actually specifically
Yes.
in action.
In action.
How.
They just don't know how to
Yeah.
do it. That's
and,
right.
And that's where it's like, counseling and the agapic
Therapy.
healing through therapy
Yeah.
is
That agapic
really important.
orientation that therapy takes on helps tremendously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
That's good stuff.
This is about the halfway point because we had a real big beginning, but we're at
did.
25 minutes or so.
Yeah, let's
So
take
let's
a
take
quick
our
break,
little break.
guys. We're going to finish out this episode here. When we return, and give us 5 or 10 minutes ish, and grab yourselves some refreshments, and we'll be right back. All right, we are back. What's up, everybody? So we're going to dive back into it now here. Was there anything else we wanted to go over? I think we left off with talking about how therapy has a agapic orientation to it, and a loving openness that's given.
Yeah. And so,
A comfortable, secure space to be self-honest and just to talk it out. Because talking something out, like writing things out or talking them out with someone else, helps us put our actual emotions into words so that we can self-understand. And it's really hard to self-understand some concepts and some insights that we would gain through self-reflection without having that opportunity to try and explicate it for somebody else.
Sure.
So once you start talking or writing, that really helps you put your thoughts into words and then get a greater and this is so much of therapy, just letting the person actually have a comfortable place to talk, because they're going to reveal to themselves ultimately the more they talk.
and even to a certain extent, you could do this where
It's like someone's holding you in a safe space. Yeah.
well, you could do it with somebody like in a way where they're not necessarily completely willing, like, like the angsty teenager who's like, I don't need counseling. Well, you do the Socratic method. Why? Well, why that? Why do you think of that? Why? Just keep asking questions until they're to the point where they're just like, I don't know. Okay, good. All right. Yeah.
I discovered a show recently on, I think it's Amazon Prime, and I think it was called Louder Milk. It's a really weird title, but it's actually, the lead is the guy from Office Space, the lead in that movie. And it seems like similar, it's not, I don't think Mike Judge is involved, but it's a similar kind of style, similar to Office Space. Now, his personality in this one, he's more of an asshole. He's a very brash, abrasive addiction counselor, basically. So he's this guy that's been clean for a while, but he's got this ultimate Eeyore kind of way to him. And he is very very upfront and honest with these addicts, and it's awesome. It's on point. It's like you were just saying.
Mm-hmm.
It's very it's confronting, but it's in a caring way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and ultimately, for those who are not willing to say go through the counseling, like, the people in rehab that are there because they have to be there opposed to seeking the help, or like the angsty teenager who doesn't want to be there talking to counsel, you can do the Socratic method, but with agapic love.
Mm-hmm.
So while they're going through that, the love is infusing them, and through them
they can tell there's good intentionality behind this. This guy's helping me in a selfless way. He's actually sacrificing his time and his effort to do something that's going to gain him nothing. And that's agapic. That's co-creative. Because then you're affording that person the chance to open up and blossom a little bit more, feel a little bit more comfortable doing so, and being more self-honest in front of you. You're giving them the chance to be self-honest, which is a gift. You're supporting them in that space. Definitely agape. That's a really cool insight. I'm glad that he pointed that out.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys, let's jump back into it here. So this is episode 17. If you guys want to check this out for yourselves, we highly encourage you to subscribe to John Vervaeke. Check out the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis series. You can speed them up to 1.25 or 1.5 or 2 times speed when you... here, let me show you all again. And we've done this before, but just in case you're new... Boom. If you don't know, you can click the wheel and change your speed, playback speed, to faster speed. And it's pretty comfortable to listen at around here for Vervaeke, I would think, for most people. But you might get away with even 2 times speed to at least be able to rewatch this series or move through the series if you're able to maintain comprehension and catch up with us and move through it quite quickly. This has been one of the most worthwhile endeavors I've ever taken on. I'm so glad that you're sharing this with me, Roy.
Well, I'm glad you bugged me for like a year about doing it. Like literally, like, dude, we got to do this thing.
Bugging
like,
people
we got to
about
do this
Vervaeke.
thing, man. We got to do this thing, and it's like, okay, all right. Actually,
Yeah,
hey, I'm having a great time. Life is starting to make a little bit more sense. I'm still, freaking
It's a
depressed
boost.
most of the time, but that's just I run depressed and angry. That's just the way
Yeah,
I am.
I feel you.
I'm an
I think it's
I'm an artiste.
partially a sign of the times and partially us just learning how to come into some kind of balance. We're trying to optimize
It's
our
a lot
processes
sometimes,
here.
so it's like balancing between, like
The world today
and-
is a lot to keep up
Yeah,
with,
man.
man. There's so much change and transition happening so fast. I feel like the ground is moving too fast beneath our feet for us to gain any sense of stability.
we're almost in a maelstrom at
Yeah.
this point. And for those who don't know what a maelstrom is a point where, like, say, like the mouth of a river or an opening going out to the to the ocean. The river's going one way, but say the tides are coming up, and then you get this chaotic flow that just sucks things in and churns them down. But there's a way to ride these maelstroms and be able to use the inertia to fling you into the next spot and not back around where you were and smash you into the wall.
Right.
So it's highly chaotic, but it is a port of entry or a point of entry or a point of exit. So it's a transitionary period place between two things, and that's where we are. And it's chaotic as hell because
Yes.
one thing's going this way and the other thing's going this way, and it's all going this way.
Yeah.
And it's hard to ride that because if you do get too close to the center where everything's moving fast enough, then it breaks you and sucks you down. But if you get too close to the walls, you get smashed up against the walls. You got to find that one perfect little spot where you just go zip, and you're out.
And shoot yourself out of it.
And not all maelstroms can be navigated. There's one that, what is it, the Columbia River. You got to have a pretty good boat and a really good captain to take something from the ocean and then go up the Columbia River because it's very large, very deep, very fast water. And then it's the Pacific Ocean, which is very large, very deep. And when the tides change, they change real quick. It's not like East Coast tides, which creep in and out. It's a matter of minutes. And then that nice little beach cove that you were on is now underwater. And I'm glad I got out when I did, so
That's wild.
yeah, it's but such is life, everything has its ebb and its flow.
Indeed.
There's always things moving, maybe not necessarily counter, but not necessarily parallel either, or sometimes in the wrong spots parallel, and then you feel like it's happening all too fast.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. To find stability amidst the storm, we must find ways to ground and center ourselves, you could say, or decenter even from our idea of having a center. The whole process of self-inquiry and meditation is to self-reflect and to turn one's consciousness basically in on itself, to observe one's thoughts and feelings as they arise. And what a beautiful thing when one realizes, oh, I can actually I can notice and see in my emotions as they arise.
Yeah.
In my consciousness, and my consciousness is not affected. It's actually what's watching the emotions arise within it.
And ideally, your consciousness isn't so entirely affected by the experience that is happening as well. So it's kind of
your
like
consciousness is just like a
bit.
camera recording.
Yeah.
The camera recording the explosion special effect that's happening off in the distance isn't affected by it in any way. The people moving back and forth don't change the quality of the lens or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's just there. It's like the ground of awareness is like this primary mode of awareness, you could say, is just aware. And it's quite peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite beautiful, and it has a sense of freedom and spaciousness to it. And so recognizing that space between our thoughts and then learning to cultivate that sense of presence in meditation, continually returning back to that spaciousness, to that just the primary awareness, is the reps of meditation. That's the exercise of it. And that's what cultivates your sense of presence, your acuity with being able to return to presence at any time. So when the world does get overwhelming, we do have the capacity to shift into this agapic mode of orientation with the world, this unconditionality that is just here and all accepting and forgiving. It's giving, it's love, and it's openness. It's receiving without any kind of restriction at default. And so we can cultivate that through meditation, through breath work. We can learn to get a sense of our being, this sense of presence as well. And so I highly recommend breath work and meditation. Definitely check out the podcast side of this show here, because we have the YouTube thing going on, but there's 70 something episodes of the podcast now, several guided meditations, Wim Hof breathing sessions, and there's other tools for you guys there to utilize as well. So I highly encourage that, because I feel it. It's like an accelerating change in the world that seems to be occurring right now too, and it is really difficult to feel that one can be in a sense of stasis and alive and joyous in this interactive dream that we are weaving together. But that is really what's happening. We are really just this one thing playing itself out. It's a great, wonderful, beautiful mystery, imbued with all kinds of contrasts that certainly allow for the realism of it. I don't know if existence could exist without the interrelating opposites. So it's a gift, and it is something that is also a challenge for us. And there is suffering involved, but we can become more optimal in our relation with our environment and one another.
In suffering in the sense of threat of dukkha, which is the lopsided self-destructive wheel.
We can learn to ride the wheel.
Yeah. Opposed to suffering in the sense of loss of agency. But there's plenty of that too.
Yeah.
Two different ways of suffering. But, and I'm not necessarily sold on this idea that the goal of a good life is to not suffer. The goal of a good life is to live as good as you can, even though we're always at threat of dukkha, and we're always at the threat of loss of agency, whether it's from an external source or our own existential inertia, robbing ourselves of our true power as an agent within this arena that is the universe that we get to help co-create.
It's what Rocky said to his son in Rocky 5 or 6. He's like, it's not how hard you can hit. I think it's how many times you can get hit, or how hard you can get hit and get back up. Because life is brutal. Life is brutal, but it's not about how perfectly you can stay in this optimal relation with everything. It's just about getting good at getting back up and getting back into kilter.
And it's something, more people should hear. And unfortunately, nowadays, it seems almost cruel to tell a child that, no, the world is dangerous. The world is not fair. It's not all sunshines and rainbows. And you're very rarely going to get what you truly want.
Yeah, but you are more powerful than you know, and you can help make it better.
That's why we tell them that, is because you actually do have the power to really truly go through it. You're going to go through this.
Yes.
And if you don't go through any of that, you're not going to grow.
Yes.
That's where, if you spoil your kid too much, then you're not helping them be a true person, because part of helping somebody be a true person.
Yeah, because you're going to die one day. They're going
preparing
to have to
them
know how
for
to
the
live without
suffering.
you. Yeah.
That's why you take your kids camping and, teach them how to start a fire,
Make them make their bed and clean up their room and learn to take care of themselves. Yeah. All right,
then
you got to brush your teeth.
And then skin their knees, and then get in fights with their friends and their siblings, and then be like, look, I don't want to hear no more. Y'all figure it out.
That's it. Yeah, giving kids the opportunity to solve problems on their own without authorities hovering over them all the time. It's actually really important for our development. We have to learn how to live with one another in this world. And it's a harsh world sometimes.
I was a kid in the 90s and early 2000s, and it was a good time. It was still running around. You knock on somebody's door to see if they're home. And if they weren't home, you got to go find another friend, or maybe like you come up on that spot where you all hang out, and then some of your friends are
there.
And
That's
you're like,
exactly what it was, man. I remember that too. Yeah, I grew up in 80s and 90s, and I remember like memorizing everybody's phone numbers. I remember the different places that we would plan on meeting the day before. All right, tomorrow we're going to be at the woods at 10. Let's go.
Yeah.
So we all show up with our bikes and we're ready.
Like that one spot, the other spot, because we don't want Jimmy to come because Jimmy's being an asshole. So we're going to go to the other spot. Here, yeah. So
that's how you learn your social acuity, though. You gotta get to practice it with your peers on your own.
So John Vervaeke, when we get back in here, is going to go into not just being stalked by, in addition to being stalked, I don't think it's stalked, but instead of not just being at risk of and stuck by existential inertia, there's another problem people face.
Yes.
And that's basically where we're at. So we're going to discuss another problem, not just being stuck
not
by
just
the inertia.
Existential inertia we can experience, but
so
something else.
This will be the next spot.
All right, guys, let's roll.
When they need significant transformation. And this goes to the heart of one of the best books. I've already mentioned it before in this series. And I think philosophy in the last 20 years. This is L.A. Paul's work, Transformative Experience. Because what L.A. Paul's work points to is a way in which these transformative experiences render us, the possibility of such transformative experiences render us kind of stupefied, because what they have us do is confront a deep kind of existential ignorance that is endemic to these transformative experiences. And it has to do, again, with this very perspectival and participatory knowing that I'm talking about. Okay, so she gives the example, she first starts with a very trivial example, just to warm you up to the thinking. She says, somebody offers you to taste this fruit that you've never tasted before. And the problem is people have a very bimodal reaction. They either say, wow, this fruit is so unlike any fruit I've ever tasted. It's so wonderful. I love it. Or they say, this fruit is so unlike any fruit I've ever tasted. I hate it. It tastes like vomit. And the thing is, you don't know which reaction you're going to have until you bite the fruit. And she says, well, do you bite the fruit? And you may say, well, I don't know. The point is, right, you bite the fruit or not, you'll typically say, well, what does it matter? There's nothing significantly at risk if I have the fruit. That's true. But what the fruit example points to is the following. There's a kind of knowing that is dependent on your state of being. This is your perspectival knowing. You don't know what it is like, because that's the core of perspective. You don't know what your salience landscape will be like when you eat this fruit until you have eaten the fruit. There's no way of knowing that ahead of time. You have to go through the experience to know what it is like to have the experience. You say, okay, I can sort of get that. So, right, this is kind of what she calls an epistemic transformation. But she says, Some of the times what we're confronting is something deeper, where we're confronting personal transformation, right? This is where what's happening again is knowing not just by having a particular perspective, this is knowing by having the agent-arena relationship radically transframed. You don't know what it's like to be that person in that world, right? Because you have to actually be changed, and the world has to be changed in order for you to have that participatory knowing. So she talks about the fact that what she means by like a transformative experience is one in which you're going to undergo that change in perspectival knowing, in that change in participatory knowing. So she gives a Gedanken experiment to bring that out first, a thought experiment. She says, imagine the following, right? She said, your friends come to you and they reveal a secret. They give you just in like indubitable evidence that they can do the following. They convince you that they can absolutely do the following. They can turn you into a vampire. Do you do it? Do you become a vampire? Now, before you put this off as silly, the point of a philosophical thought experiment is to play with something free from your own life so you can get clear about it, what it means. After we've played with it, we will go back to our lives. But here's the issue. You can't make any inferences about this, because you don't know what it's going to be like to be a vampire, and you don't know who you're going to be when you're a vampire. Because your preferences, your character, everything is going to change. And your salience landscaping is going to radically change. You don't know what it's going to be like. So here's what you face. I don't know what I'm going to lose if I become a vampire. I don't know what I'm going to lose. Once I go through this change, I will have lost a way of being. It will become unthinkable to me. I can't get back to it, but I don't know what I'm going to lose until I go through it. So, well, then I shouldn't do it. But if I don't do it, I don't know what I'm missing. I don't know what I'm missing. There could be a way of being here that is amazing and wonderful. I don't know what I'm missing. And I'm caught. I equally don't know what I'm going to lose, and I don't know what I'm missing. And I can't do any calculations. I don't know what my values are going to be. Are my values now the right set of values? Are my values then the right set of values? Is the kinds of experience I'm having now, or there is no place above I can make the comparison. I can't reason my way through it. And now, unlike the fruit example, everything is at risk. Both the agent and the arena are at risk. And you go, okay, so what? I get it. Who cares? I'm never going to be a vampire. That's not the point. The point is, once you acknowledge the logic of the problem, this is what she now gets you to realize. You confront these in your life at multiple times. Here's an example. So relevant to everything we've been talking about with agape. Should you have a kid? Should you have a child? Do you see how it's exactly the same? You don't know what you're missing if you don't have a child. Because you are going to, we talked about this, you're going to become a different person with a different salience landscape. And until you have a child, you don't know what it's like. So you don't know what you're missing. You also don't know what you're going to lose. Oh, people will tell you, oh, blah, 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 blah. But until you go through it, you don't know. You're existentially ignorant. Here's another one. Should I enter into a romantic relationship with that person? You don't know. You don't know who you're going to be, because if it's a real romantic relationship, it's going to change you. You don't know who you're going to be. You don't know what your salience landscape is going to be until you're on the other side. You don't know what you're missing by not getting into the relationship, but you don't know what you're going to lose until when you get into it. So should you do it or not? We face irreversible change, and yet we can't, there's no way to reason our way through it. Because on both sides of the transformation, we are confronted by radical ignorance. We don't know what we're missing, and we don't know what we'll be losing. We don't know if we should stay here. We don't know if we should go there. Now, I've had the pleasure to talk to L.A. Paul Laurie about some of this and present a case to her, which I think there's some agreement about this, and I look forward to, we have some future work we're doing together. Because I pointed out to Laurie that whenever we're going through any significant developmental change, like, to use Paul's example, going from a child to an adult, the child doesn't know what they're going to lose when they lose their childhood innocence, when they become an adult. They don't know. But as an adult, right? But the child also doesn't know what it's going to miss, what it's missing if it doesn't become an adult. And you think, oh, that's ridiculous. No, it's not. Do you know how much people face difficulties precisely because they get transfixed by this? Right? If I grow up, I might lose stuff. But if I don't grow up, I don't know what I'm missing. What should I do? What should I do? What should I do? Like, if I choose this career, I lose all these wonderful potentialities. But should I just keep all my possibilities open? Look at all my possibilities. But if I choose this, I'll lose. And some of those possibilities I don't even know. But if I don't ever choose, what am I missing? I'll never know because I've never actually gotten into any particular career. So we can be stupefied as we face the need for radical transformation. So people they go into therapy not only because they're stuck, they don't know how to transform, they're also stupefied. They don't know if they should. Right? And this is bound up with the aspect disguise that people get into when they're stuck. And it shows this stupefaction and the stuckness working together. Look, somebody comes in, they're doing therapeutic work with you, right? Why are you here? I'm stuck. How are you stuck? Oh, well, I'm so stubborn. I'm stubborn and I'm rigid and I need to be more flexible. Oh, okay. And then you talk to them and let's talk about other stuff. Come back and go, what do you like most about yourself? Oh, I'm persistent. I don't give up. And you see? The very thing they're trying to change is the very thing about themselves that they don't want to let go of, that they're most identified with. I'm stubborn, I won't change my mind. What do you like about yourself? I'm persistent, I don't give up, I don't change my mind. They talk about the same thing, one under a negative aspect and one under a positive aspect, and they don't realize it. They're stuck and they're stupefied. Now, when we're stuck and we're stupefied, when we're stuck, we can't imagine how to make an alternative worldview significant, how to make it viable. When we're stupefied, we can't imagine the alternative. We can't figure out how to rationally make the choice. So we get this, right? Inertia and indecision. We're stuck and we're stupefied. And then we're trapped. We're existentially trapped. And then you can think about how that could be mixed up with the stuff we talked about with the Buddha. The parasitic processing, the modal confusion. But we get stuck. how do you get out? What do you do in therapy? Because therapy works. What do you do? How do you get people out of being existentially trapped? Well, let's go back to it. Let's try and work our way through it.
Hey.
Don't you hate it when you feel stupid and stuck?
Stupefied. Get stupefied. So he picks up talking about L.A. Paul's book, The Transformative Experience, which he brought up previously in the series. The possibility of transformative experience confronts us with our own existential ignorance, our ignorance about ourselves, that he just said at the very end there, he sums it up really well. The same habits and modes of being that we wish to change. So we're in therapy, we're saying, I want to change this, I want to change that. We also are identified with. One stubbornness that they wish to change is also their steadfastness and determination, and they don't give up. And so there's good and negative aspects to things that we don't even recognize. We're identified with them. Something we wish to change is we're egoically attached to. Our ego does not want to let go of. We can't imagine the alternative, so we put ourselves in an existential trap. So let's
and
rewind a bit there.
Like what he was mentioning with the fruit, you won't know whether you like it because it's different or you'll hate it because it's different until you do it. Yep. And in the case of fruit, there's very low risk. You just spit it out. But when it comes to life, now you're adding a lot more weight to it.
Oh, heck yeah. And so the vampire example was hilarious, but the
child example is more relatable.
Much more powerful.
Because it does change you.
Yeah.
Well, and even if you could live forever, would you do it? Well, what would you lose if you live forever, and what are you going to miss out if you don't?
Yeah. So there's two sides to this. We're ignorant on both sides. We can't know either. We can't know what we're missing out on. We can't know what we're going to lose if we do it.
Yeah. And there's no higher place to view it from to gain any.
Yeah, you can't make any inferences. You can't make any predictions of what it's going to be like. The only way to know it. So this is perspectival knowing. This is like, I've never been to Mexico. I could read all about Mexico. I could learn everything there is to know about Mexico. I could even have somebody describe it to me in detail and watch videos and everything. I'm still not going to know the experience of actually being and living in Mexico until I'm there and I'm smelling the smells and hearing the sounds with my own ears, and I'm immersed in it. You can't know what it's like to swim until you've swum, or driving. Everyone remembers this. You can't imagine what it feels like to drive a car until you've done it. So that's perspectival knowing. We cannot have that with these kinds of existential dilemmas. There are experiences, or there's ignorance that confronts us here.
Yeah.
And the idea of trying to transcend it, it's like our brain wants to shut down. It doesn't know what to do with this.
I came up with
we seek out therapy to help us with this.
With a little phrase that I'm kind of proud of, and it's good for postulating in the head. You don't know till you know, and you won't until you do. And that's not reasonable, as in you're not able to reason with it.
Right. And you won't know what you can't know.
And now you know.
Or you won't know what you're missing if you do. The fact that there's this two sides to it is what causes us to be not just stuck, but stupefied.
Yeah, I have stupefaction here, but it's becoming stupefied.
Yeah, because we go to therapy not only to try and figure out how we can change something, but sometimes we don't even know if we should.
Yeah.
And
also for if we can't get that higher, say, third person perspective on it, it would help to have somebody else that can, so they can show us not just where we're stuck, but also where we're stupefied.
Because we're going to ruminate in like a repeating wheel kind of loop thing on our own, whereas a therapist can really help us map it out.
So speaking of stupefy, in Harry Potter, there's a spell which it's just stupefy, and it makes you pass out and not able to move and not able to do anything. So the word, stupefy, I don't think it's to make people dumb. It's to make them not able to do something.
No, it's like bewildered. You're bewildered and dumbfounded. You're made dumb by something that's too big for anyone to be able to figure out. Yeah. And in the face of that, we experience that existential inertia, And our existential ignorance is confronting us, and we're at a loss. How do you deal with this?
Yeah.
So you have to experience that change on both sides. You have to have that sensibility. What was that term again? Sensibility transcendence. You have to have that. You have to be able to transcend your perceptions and your sensibilities and your ideas of things to be able to see how one is operating. It's like seeing the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain.
Yeah, and I guess the unholy triad would be, being stuck, so the inertia and stupefied, and then going through the parasitic process, where you just keep,
That
where
parasitic process.
what you're most familiar with. Every time you go through, it becomes more familiar and more of what you know. And if it's in the negative aspect, it's parasitical.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Now you're even further not able to move, but bearing yourself further back into yourself. And so the question we ask is, what is to be done about this?
Yeah.
And this is, I guess, where we're going on next.
Yeah.
Unless
Indeed.
you got anything else?
No, I think that pretty well covers it.
All right, cool.
All right, guys, jumping back in.
So, what do some people do when they're considering whether or not they want to have a child? Well, some people just throw themselves into the Darwinian flow and just, right? But some people are like, oh, should we have a child or not, right? What do some people do? Well, I've noticed many people doing this, and it's very interesting. They get a pet. They get a dog, typically, and then they do kind of bizarre behaviors with the dog. They have pictures taken with the dog, and they give the dog a bed and some toys, and right, and it's like, ooh, right? And what they're doing, right, is they're doing something that's, right, kind of like having a child. Should I enter into a romantic relationship with this person? This is advice that was actually given to me when I was dating, and I see people do it. Go on a trip with them. Go on a trip with them. Live with them for 7 days. It's kind of like living with them. It's kind of like being in a relationship with them. People say, well yeah, I sort of get that. But even the things like being a vampire, how do people do that? Well, they play role-playing games. And you say, that's just fantasy. Okay, well, pay attention to the way this is evolving in our culture. So role-playing games have moved into live-action versions where you act out the role-playing, and then this has evolved into a Norwegian, not a Norwegian, a Scandinavian style, which is called Jeep form. And in Jeep form, what you're doing is you're given a scenario to act out, and the person that plays the role of like the dungeon master is like a movie director. They will tell you to cut scenes or switch roles. And here's the whole point of Jeep form. You're trying to enact emotionally difficult situations. Why would you want to do that? What people are seeking in Jeep form is they're seeking a phenomena called bleed. I'm going to do this role playing, and I'm getting this person out here is a director, and they're doing stuff to mess up with my transframing and my role playing, because what I'm trying to do is get so that the line between my real life and what I'm doing in this psychodrama bleeds. So that the line between the game and reality bleed into each other, blurs. I'm looking for bleed so that I can seriously play with the possibilities. Do you see what's happening here? People engage, and we have to learn how to take this word seriously again, they engage in play. The whole point about play, right? The whole point about play is it puts you in between. Here's the world you're in, and here's the world you want to be in, and then there's this liminal zone where we can play. It's no coincidence that as organisms become more intelligent, more in need of, right? developmental transformations, they also become much more playful. They need more and more play. And play is not a frivolous thing. One of the disasters of our culture is we think of play as only about fun. We've trivialized it. Now, play can be fun, but I don't think fun is what people are after in Jeep form. It's not really fun that people are after when they adopt a dog and treat it like a child. See, the word play doesn't have to be about fun, because you can play music, and it could be heartbreaking music. It could be Mahler that you're playing. In Tai Chi, you don't do Tai Chi, you play Tai Chi. And it's not about having fun, it's about a deep engagement with processes of transformation. So the way to think about this is, what are people doing in all these instances? They're confronting the possibility of a transformative experience, and so what they do is they have an enactive analogy. This isn't an analogy of word or thought, because that's not going to work, because this is about perspectival and participatory change. This is an analogy you enact. You go through the actions. Now, this takes a lot of skill to create an enactive analogy. It creates a lot of skill. I got to get it right. Right? If I'm doing the Jeep form, I got to get it right, and that's what the director's there to help. Might do role reversal, suddenly give me an object I got to use, right? The therapist will suddenly get you to talk to that, pretend that empty chair, that your mother's there, and start talking, right? And you got to get it right. Because the enactive analogy has to be similar enough to the world and the person you're trying to become in that world. It has to be similar enough that you can feel it. You can start to get the perspectival and participatory knowing. But it's still similar enough to this world that you can pull out if you need to. And you got to get, it's this delicate balancing act. It has to be relevantly similar to the world I want to go to, but still relevantly similar to the world that I'm in. Because I want to put myself into a place where I can play with the two, so that I can compare them together. It demands tremendous skill. This ability to come up with there's a beauty and an elegance here. An apt metaphor that you can actually play within, that you can participate in, so that you can, that's what it would be like. But I still know who I am right now, and I can feel and see and sense the two together. That's what you're doing in therapy. One of the things we need to do, as you can probably see, an implication of what I'm saying as part of addressing the meaning crisis, is we have to recover play. And I hope you now understand what I'm going to say, and that it is not meant to be disrespectful. One of the important things that religion was play. That's what ritual, properly understood, is. People are playing, serious playing, in order to try and put themselves into a liminal place, a place between two worlds, the normal world and the sacred world they want to dwell within. They're playing there in order to see how and whether they should go through the change in world and self that the religion is demanding and affording. Now notice, in order to make a worldview viable to me, I have to go through this self-world sensibility transcendence. But you've seen that before. You've seen that before. This is anagoge. Anagoge is precisely to set things up so that as this is transcending, as I'm coming more into contact with what's real, getting below the illusion, like Paul just seeing things in mirror or just shadows on the cave for Plato, as that opens up, that affords me transforming, right? So sensibility transcendence is just, I think, anagoge. And sensibility transcendence is how I enter into a worldview. So what I need is I need not only an enactive analogy, I need a way of enacting anagoge. And that is also what religious ritual used to do for us. Religious ritual was a way of playing with enactive analogies so that I can compare, so I can overcome the ignorance. I can, right? I can, see isn't even the right verb. I can be these two worlds, these two ways of being, these two persons within those worlds. But ritual also was enacted anagoge. It was giving you the skills for knowing how to get unstuck, how to go through sensibility transcendence, how to make that world viable. So in therapy, you're often doing this. You're giving people an active analogy. Okay, so you're having, like, it's coming clear that you're stuck, and it has to do with how you're related to your mom. Okay, so pretend that your mom is in that chair. I know she's dead now. Forget that. This isn't literal, but it's not fun. It's not frivolous. It's serious play. Pretend your mom is there. Enact that. Get the analogy. Talk to her. And then here, I'm a therapist. I'll give you ways of reframing her and reframing yourself. I'll help you to engage in anagoge so you'll start to know how to go through the sensibility transcendence. And that's how you get out of being existentially trapped. You have this ritual behavior. Again, like when I'm doing Tai Chi, right? This is an active analogy. I'm doing these motions. This is how, this is how, single whip, this is helping me actually enact what it would be like to be in a fight situation. But it's also anagogic, right? The whole point about doing Tai Chi is it's also radically transforming. That's one way of understanding Qi. Don't understand it as magical energy. Understand it instead as it's a way of radically transforming how I'm experiencing myself in the world. In Tai Chi, we talk about the two eyes. I have an eye that's looking out at the world and looking at myself, and what I'm doing is I'm radically transforming them. I'm trying to bring about the know-how of anagoge, and I'm enacting the analogy of fighting. It's a ritual. I'm seriously playing with an enactive analogy and enacting anagogic transformation. That's why it's a path of wisdom and a martial art at the same time. You see, therapy, real martial arts that aren't just kick and punch, but real martial arts, we're all doing this. That's why so many people in the meaning crisis are attracted to martial arts, are attracted to things like Jeep form. They're hungry. That's why they go into therapy. They are hungry. They are hungry for ways of dealing with being existentially trapped. So, people are looking for ways of transforming not just their cognition, their beliefs, but perspectively transforming their consciousness, and in a participatory fashion, transforming their character. What they identify with and how that identification enables them to inhabit an agent-arena relationship. We're close to telling you what Gnosis is. So in Gnosis, what I'm trying to do is bring about an altered state of consciousness. Because that is going to put me into the flow state. It's got the possibility of giving me a higher state of consciousness, a mystical experience that's transformative. And then what I'm doing is I'm setting this within a ritual context where I'm doing inactive analogy and I'm doing inactive anagoge. I'm doing serious play. And I have the flexibility, the cognitive flexibility. This is how the psychedelics can be enmeshed. Why psychedelics can improve therapy so much. Because the psychedelics give you the cognitive flexibility in the flow state and the possibility even of a higher state of consciousness that then empowers this process to get you free from existential entrapment. This is why you give people psychedelics and you put them through the therapeutic process and you can get them free from post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay, so now, what's Gnosis? This is Gnosis. Gnosis is to have a set of psychotechnologies that create a ritual context, like Jeep form, like martial arts, like therapy, that allows us to overcome being existentially stuck, existentially stupefied. And that is being powered by an altered state of consciousness that's induced by chanting, sleep deprivation, psychedelics. And what this does, what Gnosis does, is it frees me from being existentially trapped. It's this combination, this integration of psychotechnologies that activate and transform perspectival and participatory knowing and give us a sense of a greater reality that we want to live within, and thereby liberates us from being existentially trapped and heals us from our fractured suffering, our fragmented agency, our broken world. That's Gnosis. So what I want to look at next time is how Gnosis was taken up within a movement within the same time period as early Christianity. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Oh man, that was good. Meow, 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 meow.
Meow.
Ruff, ruff, ruff.
Meow.
Ruff, ruff, ruff.
Meow.
Ruff, 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 ruff. That low meow came out like.
That was my that was the meow that my childhood cat Scooby, once he got to be up near 18 years old, he'd just go
Scooby.
Sometimes he'd just open his mouth and not meow, he was just old as sin, so he'd be like and when you didn't pass the joy to him, he'd go meow.
I love that annoyed cat sound when you're denying them the thing they want in that moment.
I know what you're doing.
The next meow,
hey.
Meow, meow. That insistence.
So what is to be done about being stuck and stupefied? Well, playing.
Serious play.
Yeah.
Simulated experience.
Basically testing the waters in a simulated, safe playing way.
Mm-hmm. And it's the kind of serious play we do when we're making music or when people don't even realize they get a pet when they're thinking about having a child and they start treating the pet like a child.
Or even kids playing house.
Kids playing house, that's serious play.
Playing at they don't know what adults are, so they're going through, or they don't know what it's like to be an adult, but they can see what adults do, so they're play acting as adults figuring it out,
Yeah. And good actors are, definitely engaged in a serious kind of a play. They're taking the thing seriously. They could be acting out something very sorrowful or scary, but it's still something that one has to involve themselves in some suspension of belief and put themselves in a liminal state and in a place between worlds where you're like part in the imaginary and you still have enough agency of yourself to be able to play out this idea, to simulate this idea for yourself.
Yeah, and the goal of this serious play is to blur the line between real life and this psychodrama that you're creating. So this, I guess the Jeep form, but any type of,
for any kind of play, it's helping us become more socially acute. It helps us operate better in the world. This is why humans and mammals in general play.
And
not you see it all the way down to rats, not just like kittens and pups, but rats even will wrestle with one another to teach each other how to be able to scrap in the real world. And they enjoy it, but it's serious play. So yeah, you got Jeep form, you got Tai Chi. There's all kinds of things where we engage in serious play. And Jeep form sounds really intriguing. You're enacting an emotionally difficult situation, and you have a director to help make sure you're doing it very accurately and as realistically as you can. And by doing so, it helps situations bring about bleed, he says, which basically is like transference of some idea, some realization into reality. You can
and it's like re-exposing or
reality
exposing
emerges.
or re-exposing yourself to something that would be emotionally traumatic, but in a safe way, and then adding in some chaos in there. It's like, okay, well, now flip to the other perspective. Now do this. Now interact with this to help, break up the framing,
we're
a little bit of the
intelligence of how to deal with these different approaches, these different ideas, different outcomes.
Yeah, and play, whatever type of play it is integral to understand that in which we cannot know about directly. Like, the child can't know directly what it is to be an adult as a child because, well, the child's a child.
Yeah.
So what does it do? It plays house, or it plays cops and robbers, or it plays...
Yeah, we typically think that we just play for fun, but this is showing us that it's not just about fun and like sensory stimulation. We're literally trying to enact something out so that we can understand it, to be able to perform it better as we approach it in life.
Yeah, so we're using enactive analogy.
An enactive analogy. That's a great term.
Yeah.
That really helps sum it up. And this helps us elicit that perspectival change, that change of perspective that we require to be able to gain the participatory knowing that we require in order to reciprocally have that reciprocal revelation with life and within ourselves, about life and within ourselves.
And so
it has to be accurate. It has to be transferable. That's why we got to get it right.
Yeah, and accurate in the sense of accurate to not just the world that you're in, but also the world that you're trying to go to.
Yes, transferable. Well. Yeah,
so it can't be so freaking outlandish that it
similar
doesn't,
enough.
But well, that's why we like plays and stories, and we like the sci-fi and all that stuff. It's like it's similar enough.
Everything we do, we think in story. Humans are so story oriented, and we really do enjoy stories because it helps us understand how to play out different scenarios in reality. So biologically, we are tuned in to get positive endorphins when we are seeing even the hunter act out how he did the hunt, or the movie of the person overcoming a difficult trial in their life. It helps you understand how that person emotionally approached it, and reflect within yourself on how you might be able to do that too.
And good serious play really takes skill too. Like the musician playing or the players on the stage, but also somebody who's, say, running you through the Jeep method. It takes skill, which is
it's not going to be effective. It's not going to help elicit an effective change in your life, just like music not played with skill is not going to be effective.
Yeah, exactly. Impact. What is it? Jamming without... Oh, man, I got to go back. I got to go back and remember it because it was so good. But basically, jamming without expertise and without skill is just... it's just nonsense. It's trash. Yeah. I hate to say it that way. I've been there. Like you have to sift through the trash, and you have to go through it. But I think he's spot on.
You're gonna fall when you get up on the skateboard. There's that process. Yeah.
But he's spot on when he said we must recover play, and particularly this ritualistic play.
Yeah.
The very most serious play. And we play video games and we play around with things, but do we really play in a way that is helping us unstick ourselves and unstupefy ourselves?
This is why we enacted rituals in our ancient religions. That's why it's so important for us to discover at least this ritualistic aspect of of our way of being, of figuring things out, because that's another aspect of serious play, is the ritualization that we get involved in. That serious play to get into a liminal sphere. And
Yeah.
in the case of ritual, it's helping us play between this reality and a sacred ideal or a sacred understanding of reality.
And well, ritual play, so it merges the inactive analogy, like you know, like the playing through like a story, or like playing house and doing that.
Yeah.
But with inactive anagoge, which is as he said, sensibility transformation.
Yes, yeah, Anagage, when he originally taught us about that word, it's literally means to elevate, and it is the idea of enlightenment, of self-transcendence, all of that.
So your sensibility,
So Anagage helps us because it helps us, yeah, to go ahead there with sensibility.
it's both, like, so what the ritual does for us is it's both play, but it's also elevating our sensibilities and how we make sense of things, and that's what I mean by
helping us
sensibilities.
transcend our sensibilities,
yes,
see them
at the same time as playing.
Yep.
And you know,
so we can get into new worldviews. We can understand and play out the potentials of different world scenarios and agent scenarios that we would be in. And so this helps us. Anagoge is a way to get unstuck, to rise and ascend, and to enact perspectival transformation of how we're perceiving the world. We can actually start to gain some sense of it. I can role play, you know, that Mexico example I used with somebody that's been there, and get closer to the actual experience. And the perspectival transformation, it changes our participatory relation with reality. This allows us to engage in that reciprocal revelation with life and within ourselves at once, or with others. And we recognize psychedelics are very helpful in this because they help us to reframe so radically and to experience high-level flow states. So it really empowers this process of Anagage. It allows Anagage, and it allows this process of us to reach reciprocal realization through perspectival transformation and to upgrade our participatory relation with life. That's a lot. It's this whole last like 5-10 minutes, like that, just that last bit he did there, summing up everything he just said this episode. Wow, I could watch that several times over and just ponder on different parts of it, because there's so much imbued within every single one of these terms that he's just stitched together. He had a paragraph of terms that he's taught us over the last 17 episodes there that summed up a whole hour's worth of conversation and took it to another level. It's powerful stuff there. I'm going to have to rewatch the end of this one.
Yeah, so Gnosis, what a Gnosis does. So Gnosis is this ritualistic behavior that does as far as...
It's a set of psychotechnologies.
Yes, well, so what it attempts to do is it attempts to bring about an altered state of consciousness. And so Gnosis is to have a set of psychotechnologies that allows you to overcome stuckness and stupefaction through ritual practice.
Yes.
So that makes a lot more sense than just, you know, like, well, I know things, so I'm a Gnostic or whatever. It's like,
or I know
Gnosis is a having thing. Like, you have a set of psychotechnologies. That makes a lot more sense, you know. So it's like the state of Gnosis is the state of having these sets of psychotechnologies that help you unstick yourself and unstupefy yourself.
Yes.
So, like, get over the and get over the, you know,
the inertia of it.
Now, I'm sure there are techniques and certain types of, you know, certain types of psychotechnologies that are better than others within the, let's say, umbrella term of Gnosis. And perhaps even as like we're advancing as a species and culturally are more impactful now than they were, or the ones in the past are less impactful now than what we should be striving to come up with. But not getting rid of the stuff in the past, but exacting the stuff from the past into the future.
How can we further refine, and how can these different practices inform one another today that have been disparate for thousands of years but now are coming into contact? So these different methodologies of different styles of chanting, sleep deprivation, psychedelics, plant medicines, and so on and so forth. There's very many techniques that we can bring together and bring into communication now to further refine. And that name of the game right there, I love that we just got a very clear description of a way out of these existential traps that we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
These things that seem insurmountable.
Yeah.
This is why we work things out with our friends sometimes.
Yeah.
We'll role play a situation.
Or run scenarios. I've been talking with...
We know instinctually that this works.
Yeah, I've been talking with my buddy Matt, childhood best friend. And what he'll do is if he's running something down in his head and something in life that he's working out through, he'll hit me up and he'll just run scenarios. He'll tell me what's going on, but then he'll just run different scenarios that he's thinking about. And it's not necessarily he's aware that I'm running the scenarios to do this. It's just something we naturally do. It's hey man, can I give you a call? Yeah, what's going on? Okay, this is what's going on. Should I do this, or I'm imagining doing this, or what do you think about this? And
this helps
running,
you map out that arena of choices that you
and
have.
And it's there's a certain amount of play to it as well, and it is enjoyable
because you're imagining, you're role playing the situation in your head a little bit, just like we daydream things. Sometimes we'll daydream scenarios for ourselves. Often, everyone does this, and
I do it all the time.
I'm pretty sure everybody does this. Yeah, it's something we do. So becoming conscious of that you can see how you can really optimize that kind of process within yourself, and then practicing it with someone else that's anagogically affording and helping that along.
Well, that's all the notes. That's all the notes I have, and I'm turning into a pumpkin.
Yeah, that's all I got too. That was another great episode, and you can see how these things are really starting to build on top of each other.
And so, what this episode was for,
we're not even halfway through yet, guys,
is building us up to the understanding of what Gnosis is. So the whole episode ends with the line of what Gnosis is, but we had to go through
all of that
to understand what he actually meant. Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of different interpretations of Gnosticism nowadays.
Yeah.
And so people are so what does the word gnosis actually mean? Let's get a firm understanding.
And why would you need it?
Of what it actually originally meant, and then how it's been interpreted in different ways, so we can actually get a good view of this and an accurate conception of it.
Well,
this is understanding how humans got to where we are now.
Yep.
Yeah. And how we may awaken from this meaning crisis that we now find ourselves in.
And it's worth doing.
Yeah.
And it's play.
Yeah, I mean, it's
play.
It's history, man. We're taking part in it, and we're at this pinnacle point in history where we are kind of going through something like a phase shift, like a butterfly before it's come out of its cocoon. And trying to figure out how to do that, when to come out, how it's safe, and how are we going to approach the world? That's basically what we're trying to do now as a species. All of us together globally are trying to figure out how to move forward, what to believe in, what is true, what is good.
And more of us are having that hunger for the ability and the techniques,
reliable
to
ways
be
to
able
recognize.
to get ourselves unstuck, unstupefied, and out of the parasitic processing spiral, and then into a higher understanding of ourselves and the arena that we occupy and the mutual definitions we create for ourselves in the arena that we occupy.
Yes. The more clarity that we can gain together, the more accurately we can recognize what's happening before us in reality, and the more effectively we can actually engage with reality and in ways that are going to be constructive and positive, and
the more people we're going to pull in too,
Yes.
The more.
Yes, this must be an engaging, inviting game that everyone should feel welcome to come play.
And I'm realizing the more and more that I don't go super deep when I'm out with people talking about it, because there's just too much. But I'll start to talk in the what do you say and you read the words, but then you're starting to become what the words are saying. So when I'm out and about and I'm enacting what these words are, not just
embodying
the words themselves.
Yeah, embodying this
I
way
find
instead
people
of just
are
believing in it from the beginning. Yeah.
I think people are very receptive.
Yeah. Oh no, when you're embodying it, it's
they,
very attractive. Yeah.
And they seem interested.
It's attractive to us as humans. We want to be around that. We recognize authenticity. We recognize honor and honesty.
And we all know that we have, well, we may not, intellectually know, but we know of our stuckness and our just bafflement and stupefaction.
Yeah.
Whether we, acknowledge it or it's just something sitting on the back burner that's just turning away and turning away. So when you start to hear things that get your brain clicking around, your brain's going to go, ooh, that has nutrients in it. I want to consume that,
Yep. We instinctually know it. Yeah. When you can't help but notice when someone is virtuosic with something, with a skill, be it an Olympic athlete or musician or what have you. Even if you don't know how to practice or perform that skill at all, like you're not a gymnast, you can recognize high levels of acuity in somebody else, high levels of virtue and determination and practice and all of those things. So we can recognize it.
You don't need to be an artist to look at something and go, wow, that looks like crap.
Or that looks like
crap.
Yeah.
Well, there's this whole thing. Well, you just don't get it because you're not an artist. I'm like, nah, that just looks like
sometimes
doo-doo.
It
actually looks like crap. Oh, it is crap. Oh, yes.
Yeah, that was the point. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I don't get it, but hey. Right.
Hey.
All right.
So yeah, we're trying to figure out how to engage in positive change in the world. And it's, how many greats before us have saying to us, we are the world, we are the children, it's time to make it a better place, so let's start giving. Or it's time to make a change. Now I'm thinking Michael Jackson, now I'm thinking Tupac changes. Now I'm thinking Bob Marley. Yeah. Now I'm going on and on and on. This is something that we can immediately recognize as useful, as helpful, and this is a way out of the meaning crisis. This is a way out of our sense of meaninglessness and disconnection and the sense of instability. Well, if the world feels unstable, start being one of the stabilizing factors in the world, because we truly do ripple out. Everything we do makes a difference. And don't ever forget it.
And first, do it for the selfish reasons, like as in I have to do it for this selfish. This
selfish.
Well, because a certain amount of you have to do things for yourself, or else you're not going to. If you can't fend off your own dukkha, you might become the weight that.
Yeah, well, you don't do that. You don't have to do that selfishly, narcissistically.
Well, I mean, just
self-importantly, self-centeredly.
But just do it here first.
Oh, this is better for the world. Well, it's both at once.
Yeah,
you recognize the good for one and all. Yeah. Making myself a better person is better for the world. Yeah. Helping make the better world I can't do unless I'm making myself a better person. No. So work on yourself, because if you want to be more comfortable in the world and you want to have a better world to live in and for people that come after you to live in.
Yeah, and it's
that simple.
Back to the meaning of the event meaning connection is you have much more power over the meaning of something. You can make meaning than you do over the events outside. Yes. So if you can start to change the meaning within yourself and your understanding of meaning, then the world actually does start to change more, and there's more affordances to you to be able to be more impactful in the world. But it really starts with ultimately starts with the self, and then recognize what's moving through
to situations and events that happen to us. Recognize that we have control over that. We don't have a choice over what happens to us, but we have the choice in how we respond to it. So that's very helpful. And I know what you meant by when you said selfish. You meant that we must engage in self-care if we wish to help the world. Yeah. And you are just as important as everything and everyone else out there. That in fact we are truly one with everything out there. So it's a continuous process. Loving the world is loving yourself and loving others. And I think that's about all I gotta say about that.
That's all I got to. Yeah, I gotta eat some food too.
I'm gonna let you all go here.
Oh boy,
it's been a long stream, but it's been an awesome stream.
It's a good one.
Thank you all so much for joining. Make sure to like and subscribe. Smash that like button. Share with friends and fam who you think would enjoy the show. Check out Actuali on Spotify and Apple and all those places as well. And American Dharma. We got shows coming up February 10th and 11th. It's going to be Friday and Saturday. First, we're going to be in Baltimore at Zen West. And next, we're going to be in Hedgesville, West Virginia at Sun and Moon. It's not the Sun and Moon Festival yet, is it? Well, it's where the Sun and Moon Festival happens. Multiple.
I don't know. I just show up and play.
Multiple times.
I love it, but I'm a scatterbrain. I'm a drummer.
This is going to be at Seven Moons Wellness Shop at Unit 6, right next to Seven Moons in Hedgesville, West Virginia. Cool. And then after that, March 31st, I just got word from Mr. Brandon Wright of Wright Live. And we are going to be playing at Granny's in Winchester, Virginia, March 31st. And that is going to be with Cannon Hill and Six Gun Riot and D. Calhoun.
D. Calhoun.
This is an awesome lineup, guys. And this is definitely going to be worth checking out. So stay tuned. Check out American Dharma Band online. We're on YouTube. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram, all those places if you guys want to keep track and come out to some shows. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I've been Chris.
I've been DJ.
Love you guys.